Greetings and welcome to my little corner of YouTube. My name is Lindsey Pogue. I am the author of the dystopian and historical fantasy series, The Forgotten Lands, and you are about to listen to Tide and Tempest. This is by far the most exciting installment of the series, and I cannot wait for you to meet Samara. She is broken and she is amazing and she's such a badass and she can wield an axe like no other. This has a lot of Viking piratey vibes to it, which was so much fun to write. And I cannot wait to show you the Scorched Forest. So, if you have been following this series, you've listened to the other installments, this one is mega. So I hope you enjoy part 1 of Samara's story. I will be linking to the other installments and the rest of the parts in the series below. Without further ado, I'll see you guys on the other side. I hope you enjoy the ride.
Tide and Tempest, a Forgotten Lands novel by Lindsey Pogue. Narrated by Hannah Chiclana. Produced in Osis Studios. Chapter 1. The breeze is cool against my skin as I wander the rocky path down to the beach. Before the day is done, I will be far from the rolling hills and protective walls of the village. Knowing I will miss all I've ever known, I breathe in the familiar briny scent of home to comfort me later, because by nightfall, I will need it. By then, the scorched forest, which I have heard of but never seen, will be one day closer, marking the beginning of my month away with the woodsmen and woodswomen of the village, away from my mother. Despite the fact she cannot go with us, with my first brother or sister big in her belly, my mother refuses to be idle, and I'm certain I know where I'll find her to say goodbye. Stepping into the sand, I lift my face to the dulled sunlight peeking through the clouds. Waves crash around the rocks that protect our shoreline. Drying seaweed flaps from tethers lining the cliff's edge, and as the brisk air kisses my exposed skin, I commit it all to memory, for I know the scorched forest will bring inescapable heat and danger. The cawing gulls scatter as I encroach on their morning feast of otter entrails outside the empty tanning shack. Rory is gone, using the moderate weather to hunt with his son Eric, to ensure the village has enough meat and furs during the impending summer storms. I pass the pelt storage next and continue down the shore, around the rocks providing safe harbor from the wind, where I finally find her. As expected, my mother crouches in the cove of tide pools, collecting baubles for the baby's mobile. Blue shards of sea glass rest beside the shells and sand dollars on her pregnant belly as she hums. My mother is a woodswoman by nature, a fierce fighter by necessity, and the light in my father's turbulent past. Somehow, she shines brighter than ever against the dark, undulating waves, her blonde hair, as golden as mine, blowing in the morning breeze. Perhaps it is the baby in her belly, but her cheeks are rounder and there's a softness to her I've never noticed before. And hearing her hum makes me smile, because even if she cannot go with us, she is happy. My feet crunch against the water-worn stones littering the sand, giving me away, and she glances over. Ah, Samara, there you are. Her smile crinkles the corners of her blue eyes. I found something for you. Kneeling on the rocky ground beside her, I take in the dried bits of starfish and coral, and grin when I see a fragment of abalone shell. She offers it to me. It's lovely, I say, turning it over in my hand. Even with its uneven edges, it's smooth and fits perfectly in my palm. Thank you. With the abalone often too far below the water to hunt, we rarely find their shells. It matches your eyes, she says, running the back of her damp finger over my cheek. I'll weave it into a necklace for you while you're away. My gaze darts to her. You will? My mother is well known in our village for many things, but not her mending nor her patience for weaving. She shrugs. I'll be very busy while you're away, with all the work your father won't allow me to do, she teases. But I think I can find the time. Her eyes skim over my face, as if she loses herself in a comforting thought before her gaze meets mine again. It's been 14 years since I've had to prepare our home for another addition to the family. Her voice is wistful. I could use the extra practice. God knows there will be more blankets and clothes to make. Serafina will help you, I tell her, knowing her dearest friend isn't only an herbalist and midwife, but one of Ebonpeak's most gifted artisans as well. I rub the abalone shell between my fingers, and my smile falters. All the possible misfortunes the next month may bring chase away my excitement to head east. What if the baby comes while we're gone? I ask, knowing it's possible she won't make it through childbirth, just like my best friend Link's mother and little sister. Oh, I'm not worried about him. It's you being so far away that makes me restless. This will be your first time in the scorched forest, and it can be a very frightening place, Samara. You must do everything your father tells you. Besides, she says, waving my concern away, if your brother comes sooner than expected, Serafina will help me, as will Andrik and Sarah. Her hand falls to her belly, and her smile grows. But all I can think about is my father being more bristly than usual while he's away from her. Father will be worried the entire time, I mutter. He's always preoccupied, and now it will only be worse. And, I pause, staring at her belly, how can you be sure it's a boy? My mother places my palm on her belly just as the baby kicks, lighting her eyes with so much joy. It hurts my heart in an unexpected way. My mother loves me more than anything, and I know she will love this baby just as fiercely. But my father is the one I worry about, for the baby's sake. What if it's a girl, like me? I say quietly. He will not want her. Though I want a baby brother or sister, I realize my father might love them more, and a part of me hardens. My mother's happy expression falls, and her brow furrows as she takes my chin between her fingers. A swell of guilt reddens my cheeks. Your father is a complicated man, but he loves you, Samara. Even if he doesn't sing it from the treetops, deep down, you know this. While my mother seems so certain, I am not. But still, I nod, tearing my gaze from her imploring eyes. But why is he so set on having a boy? I've wondered it a dozen times, but I've always been too afraid to ask. While I understand boys are supposed to be strong and capable, I will be a woodswoman like my mother. I will be formidable, too. I will be useful. I can learn to fight like any boy in our village. But I know in my heart, it will never be enough. After a thoughtful moment, my mother's head tilts slightly and her eyes soften again. Your father has lost many people he cares about over the years, she explains. His mother and sisters were lost in the raids during his youth. He lost the first woman he ever loved before we were married. I believe your father feels too much, and it frightens him. And he thinks a son will be stronger? That he will love him less? I shake my head because his logic makes no sense to me. Not when some of our best fishermen and builders and warriors are women. Not when any man can fall as easily as a woman. My mother contemplates this a moment. Perhaps he hopes he will be able to love a son differently. Turning the abalone shell over in my hand, I heave out a breath. I don't want to go to the scorched forest without you, I admit, and I hate the slight whine in my voice, but I can't help it. Without my mother to smooth the roughness my father leaves in his wake, it will be the longest month of my life. You are 14, Samara. It is time to take your place in our village, to help provide for your family and your friends. You do us a great honor by going in my place, since I cannot contribute this season. Especially with the summer storms worse than ever, we must be prepared. Even if I dread being cooped up with my father for so many days, I know my mother is right. While the fishermen tend to their nets and the gardeners cultivate their crops and orchards in the hills, it is us, the woodsmen and builders, who must venture to the scorched forest. Because beyond the rolling valleys, too saturated from the rain, there is enough wood to harvest without stripping the land around us. It is a dangerous trip, but a necessary one that will provide 100 of us with enough materials for the rest of the year. Do me a favor, my mother says, taking my hand in hers. Never question your father's love for you. Even when he is gruff, it is only because he wants you to be safe. She brushes my hair from my face, her thumb stroking my cheek. Show him how strong you are on this trip. Show him the strength I see in you. And make him proud. I nod, but my stomach hollows a little. Of course I want to make my father proud. It's all I've ever wanted. But a part of me worries it will never be enough, which only makes me more grateful Link will be with the group. At the crunch of footsteps, my mother and I glance behind us. My father, a mountain of a man, with a long brown beard braided in two and mahogany-colored eyes that never seem to smile, approaches with his tools strapped on his back and a hard look about him. It's time to leave, he tells me as I rise to my feet. Collect your things. While he looks at me as if I'm simply his partner on the journey inland, his eyes soften as he takes my mother in, a look of longing furrowing his brow. She collects her trinkets, and he helps her to her feet. Her leather pants cling to her every curve, and her vest barely closes around her tunic-covered stomach. Don't look at me like that, Abraham. I won't wear a smock simply because my stomach is growing. That isn't my worry, he mutters. His thumb rubs the back of her hand, and his eyebrows twitch with indecision, as if he can't bring himself to let go. Abraham, my mother whispers, all will be well. I'll behave while you're away. I promise. You'll stay with Serafina and listen to Andrik and the others? My mother cups the side of my father's bearded face with a wry smile. Yes. She reiterates, I told you I will be good. It is you I worry about. You'll overwork yourself. I know how you are. Meanwhile, I'll be here, making Samara's necklace and the mobile for above the little one's bed. It will be uneventful, and I'll be listless while you're both away. Her grin is so contagious, my father almost smiles. Then he looks at me. I'm not sure what he's thinking before he meets my mother's gaze again. Though he is thoughtful, and I know it pains him to leave her behind, he says nothing more. He offers no sentimental words of parting or declarations of love. Samara, my mother says, turning to me. She unsheaths Tidebreaker from the strap on her back, the etched blade responsible for splintering thousands of planks of wood over the years, the weapon from which dozens of raiders have met their end, with an intricately carved handle of Slavic vines nestled around the bare of my mother's homeland, molded perfectly to her grip. For a moment, I'm confused. Then she hands it to me. My heart stammers, and I can feel the heat in my cheeks. For your journey, she says, may it give you courage when you need it, provide you warmth when you are cold, and remind you of me while you are away. Tears fill my eyes, knowing my mother has never parted with it since my deda gave it to her when she was young, and I hesitate to accept it. Go on, she prompts, and when you return, we will know from what ilk you are made, and forge you an axe of your own. I glance at my father, wondering what he thinks of such a gift, but his expression isn't displeased. That he thinks I'm worthy of the honor makes my heart swell to bursting. I take the axe, the weight of it making my arm strain, and I stare at the gleaming blade, freshly sharpened. Thank you, Mama, I say, knowing there is no greater gift she could give me. Come, she says, motioning for a hug. With Tidebreaker at my side, I lean in, wrapping my arm around her. Though you are a woman now, you will always be my little one. And I love you. I squeeze her as tight as I dare in her precarious state, only letting go when my father reminds me I must collect my things. They will not wait for us, he adds. Finally, I force myself to let go and stare into my mother's watery blue eyes. She will miss us, and I will miss her. But suddenly, the journey ahead does not feel so stark and lonely. Chapter 2. 15 of us march through the burnt mountains, the horses hauling the empty wagons over the rugged terrain. My lips are chapped from the heat, and the skin on my neck and back is sore from too much sun. And though my shoes are lined with leather, my feet are tender from so much walking, and my muscles ache. I'm not used to the heavy pack on my back, and Tidebreaker weighs me down at my hip, making my legs strain after 5 days of climbing the granite paths. Away from the breeze of the ocean, the air is dry, and even the wind doesn't cool my sweat-dampened skin. But I say nothing of my misery as my father leads the way. Some of the men and women banter as we walk, but not my father. As always, he is focused and silent. I look at Link, relieved that he seems as miserable as I am, even if this journey is familiar to him. He must feel my gaze because he glances over, wiping his brow with the back of his arm. "We're close," he promises, and nods toward the jagged tree line ahead. Though Link is only a year older than me, he's always been protective, when he's not teasing me or goading me into a tussle, that is. Peering into the horizon, I realize he's right. We're so close, I can see the trees marking the start of the scorched forest. They are even taller than I imagined, and I try to picture a lush green landscape instead of the brown and ominous expanse before us. Even the air smells of charred wood and smoke, and I squint up at the sky. Though it is not lightning season, I fear the odds are against us, so far from home. There are shelters and landmarks we stay close to at night, some with lightning rods like back home, and others built just large enough for us to huddle under. But should a storm strike in the middle of the day, I can only hope we'll find safety. I glance back at Gil, Link's father and the leader of our village, also my father's oldest friend. "You know everything," I say, thoughtful. Gil's shrewd Asian eyes narrow, and his thin lips purse with amusement. "Do I?" I nod. "Father says the land is burnt now. Worse than this." I gesture to the dry earth. "Would you tell us what the forest looked like before the shift?" My father overhears my question and looks over his shoulder at me. As always, his expression borders on perturbed, and I adjust my pack as I avert my gaze. Gil chuckles. "I don't know everything," he promises, "and I never saw the scorched forest when it was vibrant and full of life. I only know stories and saw a drawing once." "Were they really as green as everyone says, Father?" Link asks. "All year long?" "So the stories say," Gil continues. "But the world was a very different place then. Before the weather shifted and the great wave flooded the city, cool morning mist would roll inland from the ocean and nestle in the valleys and around the mountains." "Not the poisonous black fog that blanketed big cities, though," I clarify.
"No."
Gil peers around as if he's imagining it.
"Layers of mist that shrouded the forests, feeding the trees until they were so tall you could no longer see the tops of them. The weather was much cooler then, and the seasons more changeable. Winters were the harshest months, not the summers. Sometimes they would bring snow and heavy rains and winds. Even at home, you wouldn't dare step foot in the ocean. It was far too cold."
Sidling around a boulder blocking half the path, I shake my head, unable to imagine it. I don't understand how everything can simply change. Why does the lightning come so frequently? And where are the flowers Mother always speaks of?
"Ah, spring," Gil chuckles to himself. "It is the stuff of legends now."
But why? How can the world change to something unrecognizable overnight?
"It was not overnight," Gil says easily. "If you believe the cautionary tales, there were many warnings. But knowledge is a fickle thing. The more you gain, the more dangerous it becomes. As more advancements were made, Cities became overpopulated, industry and demand booming far too quickly. It is why so many people came to the Americas to start new lives, and why many of us look so different from one another.
Gil glances at Link and me.
Everything must have balance,
he continues.
And when you take more than you give back, and you are too greedy and reckless, there is a price to pay.
Which is why we don't harvest closer to home, I say, knowing what woods we have in the valleys are few and far between.
That is one reason, yes,
Gil says.
And the wood in the mountains is stronger against the fires, which is why, even burned, much of it still stands.
Link kicks a rock out of our path.
My grandfather told me stories about his great-grandfather, who was a farmer in China. He came to America to be part of the change, but when he got here, he discovered the change was not a good one,
he says, a bit breathless beside me.
And some of his family who were supposed to meet him never made it. They were lost at sea.
I think about the relatives I might have known had all of my mother's family come here from Russia during the shift. My dada told me stories about his ancestors sailing to the sunken city too, I say, remembering the lines that always etched the soft, pale skin of his face. I used to trace his wrinkles with my fingertip, in awe of how altered he was compared to everyone else, only for him to tease me, warning me not to push too hard or they might grow deeper. They came to be farmers. I shake my head, thinking about our 2 settlements along the coast, all that remains of the sunken city to the north, and how we rely on one another to survive. While there are nearly 100 mouths to feed now, it is nothing compared to the masses that came from all over the world to experience the wealth of what was once the great city of San Francisco.
No more questions,
my father rumbles ahead. He stops at a crest on the hill. It's only then I focused on the charred mountains that stretch around us, and my breath catches in my throat. Lightning burns etch across the dead forest floor like veins of black poison, feeding the sickly place. While some of the trees are scorched as if they've caught fire, they still stand tall and so wide it would take 10 of me to wrap my arms around them. But this forest is a graveyard as well, with fallen trunks longer than any ship I've ever seen, some of their bark crumbled to ash. There is no greenery, not like the soggy land of home, but patches of dried grass and shrubs that break through the dirt. Giant trees stand upright as far as I can see, like driftwood stuck in the sand. Horses heave and wagons creak to a standstill as the others in the group join us at the top of the hill. Like me, the men and women peer out at the devastation, though they seem relieved to finally be here, not awed by it.
Someone's been here,
Gil says, and all of our heads whip to the left as he makes his way down the hill to one of the shelters. A bundle of sage and a figurine of some sort rests atop it. Gil picks it up as my father and I head toward him.
An offering.
Gil says it more like a question, and my eyes fix on the white handprint on the wood the items were left atop of.
But to who?
A chill creeps down my spine, and my eyes scan the forest, same as my father's.
A gift,
he finally says.
To us.
Link bends down, eyeing something in the dried earth.
Hoof prints,
he says, running his finger over one of the indentations.
They used our shelters during a storm.
Gil seems to realize aloud. My father nods.
It's been a month, at least.
He turns the crisp, dried sage bundle over in his hand. It's wrapped in a leather tether with red and yellow beads hanging from it. I study the figurine in Gil's hand. It's the size of my palm and molded from clay.
The people to the east,
Gil surmises.
I've always wondered if there was anyone still out there. It's been years since anyone has tried venturing that way, where the sandstorms still decimate the desert lands. We have never had issues with them before. They must be getting bold, or desperate.
But they are not dangerous, I say. Not if they left us a gift in gratitude. I watch my father for confirmation. If he is not worried, then I know I have no reason to be. My father's eyes dart to me before he looks at Gil. They exchange a nod.
And now?
Link asks as the rest of the group murmurs behind us, exploring the footprints and scouring the shadows for danger.
What do we do?
We do nothing, my father says brusquely.
Nothing has changed, and we have work to do.
Link and I look at one another. Everything has changed if there are people we knew nothing about to the east. But then I realize Link and I didn't know about them. But clearly their presence isn't a surprise to the rest. What if they come back? The words escape my lips before I can stop them. I know my father is in no mood for more questions.
Then they come. They don't know this land like we do, and would be foolish to try anything. And an enemy would not willingly alert us of their presence if given the choice. Now, come,
my father says, loud enough for everyone to hear, and points to an area devoid of trees.
Camp is just through that clearing. Rest and water the horses. We start tonight.
Though Gil is our leader in many ways, my father is the brawn of the village, the man who has spent 25 winters in the forest, learning its ways and working his fingers to the bone. When he nods his head, indicating he's spoken his piece, everyone disperses, leaving him and me alone on the ridge. What happens tonight? I ask, because my tongue never obeys. My father peers down. Though I am 14, he still towers over me, as thick and intimidating as the ghostly trees themselves.
Tonight you will learn what it is to be a woodswoman, and appreciate the roof over your head and the walls around your village more than you ever have. Tonight you will see where it all comes from, and you will make me proud.
Chapter 3. I understand why the woodsmen work at night, and it is not only because time is against us and the storms are more frequent here and year-long. The heat isn't as foreboding at night, and it's easier to work without the oppressive sun hanging over us, drenching us with sweat before we even start swinging. It's not the reprieve of the night air I fixate on, however, but the blisters on my hands, even through my gloves, and the ache in my joints and muscles with each strike of my axe. Lift, swing, thwack. Lift, swing, thwack. The heave and pull of the blade in coarse wood tugs at every sore tendon and fatigued limb that has never strained so much in my life. But as the night draws on, my movements become familiar, and my muscles, though aching, grow numb to the discomfort. And Link no longer has to help me pull out my axe when it gets wedged too deep. Lift, swing, thwack. I wonder if it was as difficult for my father, a woodsman by blood, displaced when his people fled from the quaking mountains during the great storms, to get used to such things, or if wielding an axe has always come naturally. As dawn crests the horizon, Link and I continue hacking fallen logs into short pieces the others can stack into the wagons, readying them to be split for structural reinforcements later.
Samara,
my father calls behind me. Straightening, I blow the loose hair from my face that's fallen from my braid and glance back at him. He stands at the water barrels, shirtless and dripping with sweat, like the other men. It's only then I remember how many scars mar his body, and wonder what his life must have been like before I was born. My father holds up a cup, silently telling me to fetch more water as he glances at the buckets by the wagon wheel. There's a look in his dark eyes that gives me pause, though. It's a knowing look, as if he is giving me this small reprieve from back-breaking work, and I feel a wash of gratitude. I nod and lean tidebreaker against the wagon, collecting 2 buckets to carry down the hill. They feel light in my grip compared to the weight and motion of the axe. I stop at one of the drying lakes and crouch at the bank. It looks more like a puddle because the land is thirsty, soaking up what little water is left until the next rainstorm, whenever that might be. Hours, days, weeks. Closer to the deserts, the weather is less predictable, and though the woodsmen venture this way when the storms are less frequent, there are never any guarantees. With a deep breath, I fill the first bucket with the ladle and notice the algae growing in the shallows. I'm used to fresh and salt water, even brackish water, but nothing so questionably brown and green. Suddenly, I'm grateful for the fire at camp, despite its heat, and wonder if I will be tasked with boiling the water too. I fill the buckets quickly so I don't linger too long and anger my father. The second bucket is nearly full when I feel it. A change in the air. A charge that tickles the hairs on my arms and the back of my neck. I glance at the changing clouds above, a tumultuous gray in the dawn sky, and I know a storm is here, even before the wind shifts. I've been in hundreds of lightning storms, but never out here, where they ravage the land until it's unrecognizable. Stay low. Take cover. The words have been ingrained in me for as far back as I can remember. Only vaguely do I register frantic voices as I discard the buckets and run back to camp, my heart pounding. I know all too well what comes next. "Inside," Gil calls. He drops his axe and pushes Link toward the shelter clear of the trees. "Quickly," my father commands the others. They jump over fallen logs and hurry around stacks of wood and boulders. "Under the shelter." My father hesitates, though, and I stop running to follow his gaze. Callie and her husband Greer limp out from behind a tree, somehow injured in the commotion. Only half his size, Callie can barely hold his weight. The sky flashes with blinding light, and I scream as a bolt so hot I can feel it singe the air around me strikes a nearby tree. Callie and Greer falter once more, and my father rushes to help them. Another bolt hits somewhere in the trees behind me. I hear it searing into wood and smell smoke on the wind. When my father reaches them, he takes Greer's weight against him, and Callie runs toward safety, where the others huddle beneath the shelter. Link is calling to me from inside, but I hurry over to my father to help him as Greer stumbles again. "No, Samara," he shouts. "Go!" As his eyes harden on me, I fear his impending wrath after the storm passes. If he lives. Another bolt strikes a branch above my father's head, and I know what will happen before I see it break. "Look out!" I scream, and careen into my father, knocking him and Greer to the ground as they look up, almost too late. The branch hits the forest floor with a crack, and I catch my breath. My father climbs to his feet and tugs me up in a flurry, his eyes narrowed and his mouth pursed. "Go!" he commands, and this time I don't look back as he takes Greer's weight against him once more. I run as fast as my legs will carry me and fall into Link's open arms as he pulls me back into one of the crammed shelters to wait out the storm like everyone else. When my father is only a few steps out, he pushes Greer in behind me and hurries in himself, crouching under the awning. It's only then I realize that I'm trembling. "It's okay," Link whispers in my ear, and his arms tighten around me, but I am more angry than scared. Callie would leave someone else to risk their life for her husband, but wouldn't risk her own? I glare at Greer for being so clumsy and nearly getting my father killed, and then at Callie. "You left my father to help him alone," I growl at her, my chest heaving, and while she looks sheepish and shocked, I can't help myself. "He almost died because of—" "Samara," my father booms, and I cower into Link's hold. My father's scowl cuts through me, deep and searing, like a freshly forged blade. "When I tell you to get to shelter, you do as I say. Do you understand?" His face reddens, and the veins in his temples pulse. He's the angriest I've ever seen, his gaze molten, even if his voice is only slightly raised. My eyes fill with tears despite how furious I am with him and with Callie and Greer. My father was the foolish one who went to help someone else, and yet he's furious with me? The shelter is quiet, save for a handful of other people's ragged breaths, and I feel the heat of everyone's stares. My father glowers at me. "I said, do you under—" "Yes," I seethe, and I decide in that moment I hate my father. I can barely see him through my unshed tears, but I lift my trembling chin, refusing to blink as I glare back at him. The crease in his brow softens only slightly before he turns his back to me. Legs crossed in front of him, he stares out at the flashing gray morning. Link averts his gaze, and Gil's mouth turns up slightly in a sympathetic grimace, but I refuse to look at anyone else. I'm not sure how long the wind howls, and I lose count of how many flashes of light I see after nearly 100. Some people have whispered conversations around me, while others snore as they sleep, taking advantage of the forced reprieve. We're all used to the sound of storms overhead at home, but I'm too discomfited to sleep.
Samara.
My father's voice is low, but he doesn't look at me. Still, my heart begins thrumming again.
You must never risk your life in a lightning storm.
He says so softly it doesn't sound like him.
Not even for me. Or your mother.
But you did... His gaze cuts to me and my tongue stills.
Until my ashes are scattered across the earth, you will listen to me.
His tone brooks no argument, but there's a glimmer in his eyes I've never seen directed at me before. It's the same worry with which he said goodbye to my mother. His temple twitches, and there's a slight flare of his nostrils. It's only then I realize that he's afraid. Not of dying, or he would not have helped Greer, but of what might have happened. Of losing me, just as my mother told me. Such knowledge makes my heart hurt. All I've ever wanted is my father to act like he loves me, like he cares about more than duty and hard work. I've only ever wanted to feel important to him. And in this moment, even with his glare fixed on me, I do feel it. It's in the tightness of my chest and the burn in my throat. I'm sorry, Father, I whisper, never wanting to disappoint him. My defiance fades and I look down at my dirty, blistered hands. Gently, he lifts my chin with the rough crook of his finger. I blink in surprise, sending silent tears down my cheeks as I'm forced to look at him. I see the burly mountain of a man he is now, but I try to see him before the years hardened him. I try to imagine what my mother saw when she was a young woman.
You are so much like her,
he says, as if he can read my thoughts.
I see your mother in all that you do.
Knowing what a renowned warrior and woodswoman my mother is, I think he means it as praise, but he cannot seem to bring himself to speak so freely. My lips purse, and I swallow the knot in my throat. I will make you proud one day, I promise. He drops his hand and turns back toward the dry, warm winds of the storm whipping around us.
I already am.
Barely reaches my ears through the rumble of thunder, and I close my eyes and allow myself to smile. Chapter 4. After 16 days of cutting 27 trees, 4 lightning storms, and another 7 days of walking at a slower pace, the gray skies and rolling hills of home come into view. There's a collective sigh of relief that hums through our weary party. My father and Gil lead the way as always, and my father's quick steps leave no doubt he's relieved to be back and see my mother. I can't wait to tell her about the scorched forest and show her my calloused hands. I grin inwardly, never prouder of myself or more exhausted. The 5 empty wagons we left Ebonpeak with now creak with the weight of logs cut to manageable sizes as the horses pull them. But it's as if they too know we are close. I glance over 2 of their backs, at Link on the other side. His footsteps quicken like everyone else's, and he flashes me a grin.
Up for a wood-splitting competition now that we're home?
He asks wryly, and I involuntarily shudder and study my hands. It's not that I don't want to. He knows I revel in competition, but my palms have barely started to heal. Yes, I say, unable to resist. Link's eyebrows reach his hairline, and he tilts his head. Really? His pale skin is tanned from the sun, and I notice a few new freckles. I shrug. I can barely feel my hands anymore, so why not? I'm exaggerating, of course. I can feel every ache and sting of raw flesh, but I don't tell him that. Instead, I call his bluff. Link's eagerness fades, and he looks down at his own blistered palms.
Maybe after our return feast, he amends. This time I have the triumphant grin. Of course. Besides, we should probably focus on unloading, and I want to spend some time with my mother.
Link winks at me, clearly aware I just saved him from regretting his challenge, and we fall into companionable silence again as the others chatter happily around us. The wild grasses covering the hillsides bend to the wind, teasing the horses after days of nutrient-depleted scrubs on the rocky mountain roads, and the moist earth gives my feet a reprieve. It's not dry and desolate here, but wet and saturated from the near-constant rains. We pass the mile marker for Ebonpeak. 40 miles to the south is the sunken city, and a dozen miles before Lonemore, the oldest settlement remaining from those who fled the city before the flood. We're so close to the bluffs and cypress windshield of our village. I can feel the moisture in the air, and I've never been so grateful to be home. I inhale deep into my lungs, smelling the briny scent of the sea I clung to on the longest, hottest days. Though unlike my memory, the air is tinged with smoke. As we cross into the farm fields, my father's steps falter ahead. I see the smoke rising above the cypress, and my feet are moving before I realize I'm hurrying to catch up. Drawing closer, truly paying attention, I realize there are no farmers tending the crops, and some of the sheep in the fields aren't moving. The chatter behind us wanes, and Link steps up beside me. Where is everyone?
Raiders!
Someone behind me shouts, and as I realize they're right, the warm blood rushing in my veins turns to cold, prickling fear. My father breaks into a run. I rush behind him, toward the walls of the village, only to stop again. My breath hitches when I see a few bodies scattering the field. Our men and women with their axes and pitchforks, caught unaware. They fell in bloodied, mangled heaps with blade and bludgeoned wounds marring their bodies. Tanned, muscle-honed bodies of raiders lie crumpled beside them, their faces contorted in permanent grimaces. Though our people did not go down without a fight, dread fills every inch of me. Raiders have come twice in my life, but I was so young. My parents spared me from seeing as much as they could in the throes of battle. But even at 7 years old, from my perch up in the cypress with Link, I watched the warriors fight and fall against the effortless swing of the raiders' glinting blades. Ruthless, greedy bandits of the seas, bred only to fight and take what is not theirs. A chill ripples through me, and I can only imagine what massacre awaits us within the walls of the village. My father takes off at a dead run.
Olivia!
He bellows my mother's name while Gil, Callie, Greer, all of us, follow.
Olivia!
My father continues to call for her, and I barely see where my feet are landing as the world blurs around me. Warrior or not, I think of my mother in her delicate state. I think of the village only having her and a handful of others to protect all that we have in this world. The cypress forests that once hid us from the sea have fallen in the great storms over the years. I see it painfully clear now. Our walls protect us, but they stand like a beacon to passerby, all too tempting.
Olivia!
My father shouts, his footsteps pounding against the earth. We rush through the battered walls of Ebonpeak and stop short at a pile of raider bodies stacked near the entrance. Blood smears the ground like war paint.
Serafina!
Gil shouts, falling to the ground beside the midwife's body. Her axe is gripped in her hand, her eyes open and clouded with death. Her son Eric crouches beside her, shivering as he stares in a silent, horrified state.
The Hawkins,
he utters in a breathless rush. His face is swollen, his eyes red-rimmed with tears. Like his mother, he's covered in blood and unblinking. He stares at her lifeless body. I look him over, wondering if he's hurt or if it's Raider's blood on his skin as he grips a stained blade in his hand. "Eric?" I breathe. Gale grips his shoulder.
"Where is your father, son?"
He asks, glancing frantically around.
"Where's Rory?"
But the instant Eric stirs, his gaze finds me, and his features contort into something unrecognizable. The boy I've known since birth disappears, and there's a wildness in his eyes that frightens me.
"You,"
he shouts, and lunges for me, as if this is all my fault. I'm stunned, frozen in place and braced for his blow, when Gil grabs him and Link steps in front of me. I peer over his shoulder at Eric, tears filling my eyes in alarm and confusion. "What? I didn't—"
"Olivia!"
My father turns frantically around in the muddy, bloodied pathway and rakes his hands over his head. The village is still, no longer crawling with raiders, though they've left mass decimation in their wake. Smoke rises from rooftops, a few chickens cluck and scamper loose from their pens, and I hear wailing sorrow in the distance.
"Abraham!"
A male voice calls from one of the cottages. Andrik limps out, his clothes soiled with dirt and stained with blood, his face scratched and etched in sorrow. The look in his eyes makes my stomach churn, and I can barely hear Andrik over the hammering of my heart as he says,
"She is dead."
"No," my father utters, and he shakes his head.
"I put her inside. Abraham!"
My father sprints down the path toward home.
"They came yesterday!"
Andrik calls, and that we've only just missed them makes the realization more painful.
"No!"
my father shouts, and his legs eat the distance to our cottage far too quickly for me to follow close behind. He weaves through the village, animals scurrying out of his way as he calls for my mother. She is dead? I didn't hear Andrik correctly. Hurt, maybe. Near dying, maybe. But she can't already be dead. Olivia Grace is a great warrior, a feral lioness in the face of danger when it comes to her family, her children. And my mother would protect these people until her death. And she did. A voice tells me. I feel it creeping up my throat. Anguish, disbelief, dread. All of it squeezing my chest so that my lungs won't work, and I can't pull in the air I need to breathe. I shake my head as I run so fast my legs burn. She cannot die, not now, not without saying goodbye. The muddy path veers to the right, and I ignore the wood door torn from the cottage as I run inside. I leap over the upturned bench and stop at my parents' bed nestled in the corner. Heaving for breath, I fall to my knees beside my father. His murmurs are only a distant hum, because all I can focus on is my mother's lifeless body in his embrace. Her arms hang at her sides as my father clutches her against him, muttering incoherent pleas as he sobs into her chest. Her head lolls back, exposing her slit neck, and her dark tunic is crusted in blood. There's a knife wound in her pregnant stomach, too. Mama, I breathe as a sob breaks free. I blink through tears as I stare at her calloused hands and limp fingers. Tidebreaker. I took her greatest weapon so she could not protect herself. Even though she wanted me to take it, I can't deny she might still breathe if it weren't for me. Many of the villagers might still be alive. And I realized then why Eric is so angry with me. She could not protect them. And that I had even for a moment resented the baby brother or sister I will never have makes me sick to my stomach. I cry harder, no longer able to see through the veil of tears or breathe through the pain as another, more guttural sob rips through me. Trembling on the floor, I gasp for air as I imagine her final moments of determination and her fear. Not fear for her life, but for her unborn child. For my father. I'm not sure where the thought comes from, but I know it's true, and another sob appeals from my throat. No. Please, no. My father rasps into her chest. I notice the abalone shell tethered around her neck, crassly woven, but I can imagine her doing it vividly, the way she held her mouth and cursed when she grew impatient. And I weep harder. She made it for me, just as she promised she would. I reach for the necklace, needing to touch it. No, my father barks, and I shrink away. Don't touch her! The desperation and anger in his voice scares me, and I cry harder, feeling an ache so keenly. I wonder if living is worse than dying, and if there is any way to escape the hollowness of misery. Misery to know my mother's eyes will never open again, and her fingers will never again stroke my hair or cheek. That my baby brother or sister will never come. My heart burns. My chest aches. My throat is raw as my body trembles, and I fall back to the ground in a heap. I can't hear my father's cries, or even my own, as my thoughts become a thick haze of disbelief that numbs me over. Every time I open my eyes, I think I might wake from a nightmare. But my father still holds my mother's body. He still strokes her hair. He still murmurs her name as if he expects her to answer. I'm not sure how long I lie on our floor, feeling too much and an emptiness all at once. But at some point, Link lies down beside me, and his arms wrap around my middle, pulling me into him. Then I hear Gil, his voice soft in the dying light outside, though I don't know what he says, and I realize Link is gone, and the floor is cold beneath me. When I open my eyes again, candles are lit in the cottage, and I hear the distant crackle of fire, casting a glow that makes it all feel more like a dream. And for a moment, I think that if I turn around, I might see my mother and father sitting at the hearth. My father mending his trousers and my mother sharpening their axe blades. A woolen blanket falls from me as I sit up in confusion and with a spur of hope. My father no longer sits beside their bed, and he is no longer crying. He lies beside her instead. His eyes are closed, and the abalone necklace around my mother's neck glints in the flickering light of the cottage, despite the blood staining the woven twine. My eyes and nose are raw and burn from so much crying, but I ignore it, just as I force myself to ignore my father's potential anger if I disturb him. A part of me hardens at the thought. She may be his wife, but she is my mother. I am sad and broken and hate the world. I want to fall asleep in her arms, just as he does, or hear her voice one more time. My heart squeezes, my chest tightening anew, and I rise to my feet. I have lost her too, and my father doesn't get to keep her from me, or my necklace. I glance around the cottage. A fire burns in the hearth, and my father's deep breaths fill the silence. I step closer, eyes darting between him and the shell hanging around my mother's neck. As the air shifts with each careful step, I smell it. My mother's decaying body. And I cover my mouth so as not to sob aloud. I know it's only a matter of time before she must be put to rest, and I squeeze the tears from my eyes. Stopping beside their bed, I pause before slowly reaching for the necklace, uncertain how to remove it without waking my father. My palms sweat, my fingers twitch. Gently, I take the abalone shell between my fingers, running my thumb over its colorful, smooth surface.
Though you are a woman now, you will always be my little one, and I love you.
My nostrils flare. This belongs to me. Chin trembling, I close my eyes, and without another moment of hesitation, I tug the tether from around her neck. Exhaling an unsteady breath, I grip the necklace tighter, drop my arm to my side, and steel myself before I open my eyes again. When I finally have the courage to look, my father's dark gaze bores into me. His jaw clenches, his lips purse. I don't look away, or even blink, determined to claim what is mine. But though he looks angry, my father says nothing. He only stares at me, and when it's too much for me to bear, I turn and leave the cottage. Lifeless and decaying is not how I want to remember my mother. Head pounding, I walk next door to Gil and Link's cottage. Gil sits on the fence around Fergus's pasture, staring out at the sacked, torch-lit village sprawled out below. When he hears my footsteps, Gil looks over his shoulder, immediately stepping down. His gaze is that of a caring father, a beloved uncle, someone who aches with loss but yearns to provide comfort. It's in that moment that I begin to break again, and Gil opens his arms to me. I run to him, realizing my best friend's father cares more for me than my own. And that hurts almost as much as the knowledge I no longer have my mother.
I'm so sorry, Samara,
He breathes.
I am so sorry.
I cry into his chest as his arms squeeze tighter around me, and then I sob harder, knowing whatever comes next will be the hardest of all. We must bury her, I tell him through my tears. We must clean her and lay her to rest.
I know,
He whispers.
I'm giving Abraham until dawn.
Gil holds me for a few moments, then takes a step back.
You should lie down with Link. You are exhausted, and he is worried about you. He is angry I made him leave your side.
I nod, but I am too restless and broken to sleep. Later, I think aloud. I pass their cottage, lit by a flickering fire, and head to my mother's favorite tide pools, determined to remember her smiling and full of light. Chapter 5. I sit at the table, feeling husked and empty as I thumb the abalone shell with only the fire in the hearth to comfort me. I stare at Tidebreaker propped beside it. It's been 2 days. The dead are cleaned and cremated. The smell of wood smoke and mint oils hangs in the air, but I have not seen my father. Not since Andrik and Gil pried my mother from his hold. Not since I shouted at him to let her go, that her soul must be put to rest or left to wander the earth alone. My father's eyes had met mine only briefly before he couldn't stand it any longer and looked away, as if he too felt like I was partially to blame. Then he stormed out, disappearing without a word. I'm not sure what hurts worse, the realization that my mother is dead, or the blame I saw in my father's eyes. It doesn't matter how many times Link has told me it wasn't my fault, or how often Gil reassures me there was nothing any of us could have done. I feel the guilt, alive and acidic in my blood, eating away at me with each thud of my heart and averted gaze from my father. I'd been grateful for the tears in my eyes as the flames caught my mother's body, and Gil spoke the hymns of her ancestors. I didn't want to watch her burn. I didn't want to witness my father across the fire, simply existing in a frightening, silent fury. I'd wanted nothing more than for him to reassure me we will find a way to be okay, that I haven't lost him too. But no matter how many times I tell myself he will come around, and it won't be like this forever, that the next time he steps through the door, he will be different, I feel the truth in his absence more keenly, and the tears threaten to return. I try to wipe them away, but they fall with each realization, harder and faster. He will not forgive me. My father will not hold me and tell me he loves me. He will not utter soft reassurances. He has forsaken me, and my heart breaks all over again. The loneliness is soul-crushing, the pain is mind-numbing, and the desperation is all-consuming. The repaired door to the cottage swings open. Choking on a sob, I wipe the tears from my cheeks. My father stands at the threshold, his eyes widening slightly on me before his brow furrows. He looks at the necklace in my hand, and I hold my breath, waiting for him to shout. "I'm leaving," he says, barreling toward the trunk at the foot of the bed. What? Leaving? That slices through me harder than any scathing words he could utter. For how long? I say with a sniffle, but he doesn't answer. I stand up, forcing back a sob. Am I coming with you? Where are we going? South, he says, slamming cupboards and stomping around in a whirlwind. And you're not coming. He knocks over a stack of wooden cups in his haste, sending them clanking to the floor. I will make them pay. My heart stops beating, and I can't breathe as I comprehend his meaning. You can't! I shriek and run to him. Father! He sidesteps me, not sparing me a single look. I must. She is dead, so they must die, all of them. They will kill you, I cry. So what if they do? He growls, and I don't think I hear him right. Is that what he wants? Death? Please, don't go. What about me? You can stay. He whirls around, and my breath catches in my throat as the rage in his eyes sears into me. It roils and burns and fills me with an indescribable fear. And have to look at you every single day, he bellows. I stumble backward, my back slamming into the table. His words are poison and they curdle inside me. He isn't a father. He's a monster. He throws his hands up, his eyes fixed on me, scouring my face, scrutinizing every inch of it with disgust. Every time I look at you, she is all I see. My mouth parts, and I don't know what to say. It's not hatred he sees when he looks at me, or blame. But my mother? He leaves because I look like her? I'm losing him because she is a part of me? My mind races and desperation claws at me. Please, don't go, I whimper. He may not be a loving father, but he is my father all the same. He makes me feel safe. He is my blood and tether to this world. With him, I know I can never truly be alone. Not if he stays. He's all I have left. Please. My father shakes his head, running his blunt fingers through his dirty, disheveled hair. I can't bear it, he utters, and goes back to pillaging the house for supplies. I must go. He shoves his leather arm guards into his satchel. I will take men. He drops a handful of jerky in his bag next and picks up his axe, ready to walk out the door. I will avenge her. My mind races as he closes the flap of his bag, and my body is moving before I can fully comprehend what I am doing. You can't, I say, images of him bloody and dead at the hands of the raiders flashing in my mind. Please, you don't have to go. I don't have to look like her. Yes. No. He ignores me and turns to leave. Wait! I grab the bread blade from the canister on the table, desperate to show him he can stay here with me, that I don't have to look like her, and I slice the side of my face, not even registering the burn until the hot blood drips down my cheek. But my father continues out the door. Wait! I screech and run to the door. Father, please! I cry, my voice garbled and wretched as my pleas go unanswered. Wait! I pause, cutting into my face again, showing him I can look different. But he never looks back. Chapter 6. 2 years later. When it feels like you have nothing, it's easy to resent the world. Even easier to turn the anger, hurt, and longing for what you'll never have into a shield, fortified by every regret. It not only protects me, it drives me forward. Eric's breath is hot against the side of my face, his grip calloused and clammy on my arm. He smells of sweat and mud from grappling in the damp earth, but every ounce of him is coiled with strength. He only has one goal in sparring with me: to win.
You're not so tough without your axe, are you, Scarface?
Loathing drips from his every word, bolstering my armor of resolve, and I don't waste an ounce of energy with a retort. As Eric's armbar tightens around my neck, I ignore the discomfort of the headlock he has me in and focus on his panting, on the fact that his body is so close to mine. He's larger and heavier than me, and he's quickly running out of steam. While I am no weakling, my lithe, sinewy body is to my advantage. More than that, I am utterly determined to outmatch him, because if there's one thing my father taught me, it's that I'd rather be dead than ever feel or show weakness again. Channeling my rage the way Gil showed me, I imagine Eric as the faceless brute who murdered my mother, ready to release my wrath. But it's my father I see in the man's place, and my breath catches. Eric snickers in my ear, assuming he's winning amid my distraction, but that only angers me more. His arm tightens around my neck. He's enjoying my struggle to breathe as he waits for me to submit, but as he focuses solely on his supposed victory, I surprise him. I rear back, my skull cracking against his nose, earning a snarled curse. I kick my leg back around his, using Eric's height against him as he topples over, and when he falls onto his back, I seize him in a leg lock. He kicks me away with his free foot, growling at me as he knocks me off like I'm nothing but wet linen. His brown eyes radiate animosity as he wipes the blood from his nose, but I don't miss how he winces, lifting his arms in offense. I grin wickedly, and just like Gil taught me, I use my opponent's weakness against him. It's Eric's bruised body that will help me win this match, and I roundhouse kick him under the rib. Eric hisses in pain as Link and the rest of the guys holler around us. It's all I can do not to smile in victory as I drop to a crouch, leg sweeping and knocking him to the ground. As I straddle him where he lies face down, I lock his head in an armbar. Without Gil to instruct us as much because of his arthritic state, we're left to our own devices, and I don't mind in the slightest. Ignoring Link's cheers of praise outside the circle, I flex my arm tighter around Eric's throat. "Say it," I grunt out as he struggles against me. I squeeze my thighs around him, holding on.
"Is that all you got?"
Eric gurgles, and he curses as I tighten my hold. His spittle is wet against the crook in my arm, but I feel his body tiring. He has no choice. With hands clenched into fists against the dirt, Eric curses out of breath before he finally concedes.
"Fine, I'm out."
I release my hold and roll off him. Sweat drips down my temple, and I'm smeared with dirt, but it's my legs trembling with fatigue that I have to steady as I climb to my feet. "Nice one, Mar." I meet Link's gaze, seeing the pride shining in the dark depths of his eyes, and warmth fills me. A smile teeters on my lips, but when Link grins at Violet, the new girl, and she beams back at him, whatever glory I'm feeling deflates a little. Sure, she's got a pretty round face and flawless skin, unlike mine, but that's how most of the girls are who don't spend weeks in the scorched forest every year. Fair, with soft hands and delicate, unmarred features. Her long, curly brown hair sways around her hips as she walks. But other than that, she's weak and naive, and I don't see the appeal. Link's and Violet's eyes linger on each other for the briefest of moments before he walks over and wipes dirt from my face with his thumb. I'm not sure when I started getting butterflies around Link, but my cheeks warm under his touch. "You're a mess," he says, and I don't register that I'm holding my breath until he smiles at me again. Realizing I'm being a ninny, I bat Link's hand away and roll my eyes. There are worse things, I tell him, but I brush the rest of the dust and grime from my cheek despite myself. I make a mental note to wash my face at the first opportunity as I peer back at Eric. He runs his hand over his shorn head and spits into the dirt before he brushes himself off. Wyatt, his ever-present shadow, helps him, and Eric's glare cuts to me, sharp as my axe blade. Here. Link hands Tidebreaker to me. I don't call it that anymore, though. It's just an axe. It no longer holds a majestic awe over me, as it did when I was little. Only terrible memories. Now it's nothing more than a blade I can wield to protect myself and provide for the village. I sheathe it on my back as Violet comes over to us, her dark curls catching in the breeze. Unlike Link, who doesn't notice my scars anymore, Violet's blue eyes fix on the puckered skin of my cheek. Only fleetingly, but I notice all the same. It's ugly. I know that. I hate it as much as I hate my father. But Link doesn't seem to care, and that's a comfort I can never express. And it flares a hope inside of me that I'm afraid to stoke for fear of getting burned. I clear my throat, pushing my growing affection for Link aside, as Eric, Wyatt, Caden, and Kenneth walk past us, heading back to the village. Eric's penetrating glare finds me again before he spits once more and strides out of the clearing. I have to admit, I say, I like the days we aren't supervised during sparring. I try and fail not to be too satisfied with myself. Yeah, that was a great match, Mar. Link nudges me with his elbow as he falls into step beside me. Violet walks beside him, and we follow the guys back to the village. It isn't lost on me that she chooses to walk with us instead of the other 4 guys who would welcome her attention. I want to spar with Eric next. Link muses. He's good, even if he's a jerk. I wouldn't mind him at my side when... Link's gaze darts to mine. Well, if I ever need him. I look away, hating to think about what happened 2 years ago. More than just my face changed after Desolation Day, the largest massacre in our village to date. Not only did half of the able-bodied villagers that remained leave with my father, only to die in their retribution, but the storms have also worsened over the past 2 summers. That we've only had one smaller raid since has been our only saving grace, even if we all feel like we're holding our breath, waiting for what comes next. Why does Eric hate you so much? Violet asks. My gaze shoots to her, wondering what sort of life she had before she came to Ebonpeak, because it clearly wasn't a harsh one. Her eyes are bright with curiosity instead of shadowed with fear and hardened with resolve, like ours. She's so different, and Link sees it too. I think that's what I dislike most about her. When I realize she's staring at me too, waiting for a reply, I peer down the path at Eric and the guys. The truth is, Eric didn't think much about me at all when we were younger. We were just 2 kids who sometimes played together when our mothers warranted it. But everything changed after Desolation Day. My entire life. Eric's too, if his festering hatred is any indication. He won't speak to me unless we're sparring, and even then he can barely stand the sight of me unless he's inflicting pain or insulting me. I've come to forgive myself for the part I might have played in my mother's death, but Eric clearly hasn't. And perhaps he also blames me for my father taking Andrik and the other strong bodies with him when he left, leaving our village even more vulnerable. My face offends him. I finally answer, because that's true too. Link elbows me. Quit. I balk at him, throwing my arms up. Just ask him. Though I can feel Violet's attention studying the crassness of my face, she doesn't ask me what happened. I'm sure she already knows, or has heard a version of the story at least. I think Eric hates that he's no longer the best, Link says as he turns to Violet. He hasn't won a match against Mar all year. I shake my head. I'm not the best, just more determined. Whatever you say. Link chuckles, a familiar, comforting sound that's gotten me through the past 2 years more times than he'll ever know. You two hate each other, but you're a lot alike. Don't even say it, I warn. Link looks far too pleased with himself.
Well,
Violet drawls, kicking a rock in the path as she tucks some of her hair behind her ear.
I get that we need to practice, but if you ask me, you all take the whole fighting thing too seriously.
My head whips to her. What? Link's gaze shifts to me and he grimaces. I open my mouth with plenty to say, but Link clears his throat. You can't say things like that, Violet, he tells her. Not when you haven't seen what we have. But while I'm fuming, Link's voice is soft and patient. You want us to be able to protect you and your family during the next raid, don't you? You should be able to protect yourself. I bite out, which earns me a hard glare from her. But I can't help myself. I stop mid-step, assessing Violet as I look her up and down. Raiders don't care if you're pretty or young or pregnant like my mother. Even if you have 100 men to protect you. They care nothing for you, will take whatever they want, and that's before they kill you. So why wouldn't you want to be the strongest you can possibly be?
I didn't mean it like that.
She deadpans. I clench my hands at my sides, but try to suppress the anger boiling up inside me. Then how did you mean it, Violet? Her lips flatten, and she looks at Link to come to her defense, but he knows better than to contradict me. Nor do I think he really wants to. I'm with Samara on this, Vi. Sorry. Nostrils flaring, Violet straightens her shoulders, but she seems to fold in on herself as she realizes Link's disappointment in her tactless, unfeeling words. Her cheeks redden, and she has the good sense to avert her gaze.
I'm sorry,
she mutters and continues walking. While I know the group of outlanders her family arrived with have only heard tales of raiders, having come from a mountain village that burned in a lightning storm, she can't truly be so dense after settling in Ebonpeak. We continue down the narrow path in silence, the copper finials lining the village walls glinting in the muted sunlight. Unlike Violet's village, that wasn't prepared for lightning storms, on the coast, we have no choice but to be. As a gust of wind whips over me, my gaze flicks to the brooding clouds forming over the sea. A storm is coming, and not the rainy kind. Another one already? I breathe, hating that we've only had a couple of days between tempests. We should hurry, I think aloud. Your father's probably readying the cottage for the storm. Link nods in agreement as we quicken our pace. I need to make sure the roof...
Link,
Violet says, nearly stumbling as she tries to keep up. Link grabs onto her arm to steady her.
would you mind double-checking my parents' cottage too? You know my father's gout is worsening.
Her eyes are bright, wide, and pleading. I should, Link glances at me uneasy. My dad.
Please?
Violet asks, flashing him her big doe eyes.
He's been struggling a lot lately, and I just want to make sure he doesn't need help with anything. We're not used to the storms yet.
She rests her palm on his bicep.
It will only take a few minutes, and... Her eyes shift to me. Your dad has Samara to help him.
Go ahead, Link, I say to save us some time, but it's all I can do to refrain from rolling my eyes. I'll help your dad. I know how Violet is, relentless when it comes to Link, like when she pleaded for him to help her with self-defense, despite Link telling her I was a better choice. I don't glance back as I hurry through the giant redwood gates of Ebonpeak, along with the fishermen coming in from the pier. The faint scent of charred wood catches the breeze as chimney smoke wafts from some of the cottages, and workshops and storehouses line the paths. The soft clank of driftwood and sea glass barely meets my ears over the village chatter, and what muted light is left of the sun peeks through the clouds, glinting off the defending lightning rods that spear from the walls. Fleetingly, I think about the scorched forest, how dry it is compared to here, and that a part of me longs to return each season and get away from the memories that cling to Ebonpeak. They're everywhere, like the moss and lichen that breed in every crevice and hangs from every rooftop in this drizzly place. Glancing back at Link and Violet, I watch them veer left to her parents' cottage, through the bustle of people hunkering down for the incoming storm. They stop at her house on the corner, where Violet's mother, Tilly, gathers the baskets of wool she's been spinning since I stepped outside this morning. I watch her smile grow as she notices Link and Violet approaching, and I try not to dwell on what might come of their friendship. Link is mine. He's always been mine. And until Violet, I've never had to question what he and I are to each other. Best friends, of course. And as I tell myself that's what we will always be, I also feel sick to my stomach, imagining him spending time with Violet instead, that she might take him away from me. Pushing my fears aside, I continue up the road to Gil and Link's place at the edge of the village. I'm not sure it will ever feel like home, even if they took me in without hesitation. Ahead of me, Eric heads into the alehouse, likely to collect his father, who seems to live there most days, and Kenneth hurries down an offshoot of the main road, where I notice his younger brother closing the shutters of their place. With a village that was once at capacity, the parcels between cottages are small, even if many of the homes have remained empty since Desolation Day. Brom, the closest thing we have to a healer, nods at me in greeting as he hastily collects the herbs drying on lines strung alongside his cottage. I pass the fish storage, the powerful scent filling my nose, and I notice Wyatt stop at that woodhouse to help his grandfather. The old man fills his shaky arms with firewood to feed their hearth during the storm. Everyone is used to this. Everyone is as prepared as they can be. Even the elderly work their fingers to the bone in order to ensure their survival in this unpredictable place. And yet, to Violet, none of it equates to life or death, and it makes me harden toward her even more. When I get to Gil's, I ignore my family's run-down cottage next to it and stop to wash my face at a bucket of water outside the barn. Fergus's long donkey ears shift to me. "Time to hunker down," I tell him, then splash my face. Despite the impending storm, it's muggy out, and the cool water feels good against my skin as I splash a few more handfuls, scrubbing the dirt away. I can barely feel my cheek, though, the skin rough and puckered beneath my fingertips. Gripping the rim of the bucket, I blink my eyes open, staring into the rippling water as the remnants drip from my nose and lashes. A pale face glowers back at me, with blue eyes and 2 finger-length scars side by side that mar my cheek down to my chin. A daily reminder it was all for nothing, and I was not enough. And roiling anger, shame, and pain spark back to life all over again. Refusing to look at myself longer than I have to, I straighten and wipe the dampness from my face with the back of my arm. I lead Fergus inside the barn and double-check the latch as I close him inside. Leaning closer, I peer through a hole in the wood to find him staring at me, his ears back in irritation. "Don't even think about kicking anything," I tell him, and he brays in answer. "Just try it." I mutter, "You might actually get blown away and learn your lesson this time." Fergus is stubborn and easily bored. Like the rest of us, he's accustomed to the frequent storms that grow tiresome, but it doesn't make them any less dangerous. Many have died from lightning strikes, like Wyatt's father, or lost their livestock that have gotten loose, or their homes that have caught fire. Only a few have survived their ferocity. Caden's sister and the blacksmith among them, with fractal scars forever etched in their skin. Still, somehow their markings, or what we can see of them, are beautiful compared to mine. And I wonder if my unsightly scars are a penance for inflicting them on myself. I stare at Fergus long enough. He heaves a heavy sigh in defeat and drops his head. "See you soon, boy." Leaving him to his moping, I grab an armful of firewood to tide us over during the storm. The cottage door opens with rusty protest, and Gil steps out, rubbing his thin, graying beard. He nods to the storm clouds. "I was wondering if you two would make it back in time." His gaze lands on my face, lingering for a moment. I know he's not staring at my scars, but at the bruise I can feel forming on the apple of my cheek from today. I grin. I won. Obviously. Gil tilts his head. "Obviously," he says dryly, and nods for me to come in. "I've already checked the storehouse and brought in the pheasants," he says, taking some of the wood from my arms. He glances around. "Where's my son?" Helping Violet, I grumble, earning a low chuckle from Gil. With a final glance out at the churning sea beyond the walls, I wonder how many days we'll be cooped up this time. Well, come in then. Dinner is hot. The air smells of pickled ramps and smoked venison as I step inside, making my mouth water. I'm starving, I realize, my stomach rumbling on cue. The pheasants bustle in their crates, stacked in the corner of the room, and the roof groans as the wind picks up again. I peer up at the patched ceiling above Gil's loft, across from the one Link and I share. No light streams through any forgotten holes, which Link was worried about. Gil prods at the fire. Change out of those filthy clothes and come eat something. 2 years ago, Gil was my best friend's father. Now, he feels more like one to me than my own father ever has, and a warmth of gratitude spreads through me. Do you think Link will make it home in time? I ask, knowing that if the storm breaks before he returns, he might be stuck with Violet for a while. Which she likely planned, I grumble internally. He will, Samara. Don't worry. With a nod, I head up the ladder to the loft, though I have a sickening feeling Violet will get exactly what she wants. I stop on the top rung and stare at Link's pallet beside mine, and closing my eyes, I imagine the feel of his arms around me every night I've cried in his embrace. I remember how soft his lips have often felt against my temple, the way they've lingered so close to my mouth, and my heart nearly skips a beat at the memory. I recall the feather-light brush of his fingertips over my scar. I'll always be here, Mar. I promise. And in that moment, I pray more than anything he'll keep his word. But lightning shadows lick up the walls, thunder claps out at sea, and I sense the shifting tides. As the third storm of an early summer rolls in, so does more change. I can feel it with every fiber in me, and that muscle-clenching fear and desperation I've tried so hard to ignore the past 2 years bubbles back to the surface. Squeezing my eyes shut, I swallow the tightness in my throat and fist my hands until my fingernails cut into my palms to ease the pain. Only then do I allow myself to exhale. Part 2, Chapter 7, 4 years later. The setting sun casts baleful shadows across the ocean as the water rolls in angry swells, crashing against the rocky coastline. It's as if the sea churns in preparation for the next windstorm. The 6 of us set about our tasks after a long day of traveling from Ebonpeak. Link and I tend to the fire in the pit, building it to crackling for our first night in camp. The wind isn't as strong outside the once great city, not where we're nestled in the ruins of whatever monstrosity towered at the cliff's edge centuries ago. Are you cold? Link asks, prodding at the building fire. I can grab your cloak. I meet Link's gaze, his eyes flickering like firelit obsidian in the burgeoning flames. I'm okay, thanks. It's a lie. I have the goosebumps to prove it, and I hold back a shiver. Mar. I'm fine, I snip, which earns me an eye roll in return. Link's slanted eyes narrow as he squints against the setting sun. So, if I got up to get my cloak, you wouldn't want me to grab yours too? I'm not sure when his know-it-all tone became less endearing and more frustrating, but it's been that way for a while now. I said, I'm fine. He shrugs at my obstinance, and his shaggy black hair catches in the breeze, flopping into his face. I have to resist brushing it from his eyes. Have it your own way, he concedes, and puts another log on the fire. The breeze feeds the flames higher as the fire builds to a small blaze, and I split a few more pieces of wood before stacking them to the side for later. I might be acting like I'm 16 again, but it feels wrong to pretend things between Link and me are easy or close to what they used to be. The past year has been anything but enjoyable with Violet at his side, especially now that he's practically living with her, since her father's health took a turn for the worse, and Link jumped in to help pick up the slack. I can't risk falling into the old patterns of whatever lines we blurred before that, simply because she isn't with him this scavenging trip. Things aren't straightforward like they once were. We're friends with a history of comforting each other in the worst of times, who have been intimate more than once. Best friends who I thought fit perfectly together, forever and always. And it feels like I've lost the one person who's ever truly understood me, who's ever really been mine. Just like I knew I would. Link was never really mine, though, and I never told him how I felt, fearing it would make him overthink things and, in turn, change everything. Or maybe I knew it was different for him, and I didn't want to hear him tell me he didn't feel the same. I split another hunk of wood and added to the stack as disgruntled voices reached my ears. "Were you even there?" I glance at Sam, bickering with his brother by the wagon. "I won that tournament." "No, you didn't," Kenneth scoffs. They lead the 2 cart horses to the 3-sided lightning shelter, bantering back and forth. "Do you think they'll ever agree on anything?" Link asks, watching them over the flames. There's sometimes a longing in his eyes when he looks at the twins, and knowing his sister died in childbirth, along with his mother, I can imagine why. Not for the first time. I wonder if the echoing reminder of what Link and I have lost is what binds us together. He's an older brother without a charge, and I'm a girl without a family. My eyes linger on Link for too long, and when the wind picks up, stirring me from dangerous thoughts, I lean my axe against the cement ruins we're hunkering down in, unable to resist a shiver this time. I nod to our things piled in the back of the wagon. "I'll grab your cloak while I'm up," I tell him, "and the mead, of course, while we wait for Wyatt and—" A laugh carries closer on the breeze, and Eric walks around the side of the cliff, lugging a boar draped over his broad shoulders. Wyatt carries their bows and arrows, keeping pace beside him with each long stride. For reasons I can't fathom, Wyatt never leaves Eric's side, one of the few predictable things in Ebonpeak. The instant Eric's stone-hard gaze meets mine, it cuts away, hammering in his dislike of me, as if I can forget. He's stopped calling me names over the years, but even in his quiet reserve toward me, his revulsion remains as strong and obvious as ever. It's in each glare and booms in his silence. Wyatt's eyes dance with excitement when he spots us. "Dinner!" he practically sings. A couple of years younger than Eric, Wyatt looks like he's barely 16 instead of 18, with his lanky body, shaggy red hair, and freckles. His green eyes gleam in the dying daylight, and while the other 5 of us are exhausted from trekking to the city, Wyatt seems completely unfazed. "You should have seen him," Wyatt says in awe. "The boar got loose from the snare, and just when I thought he was getting away, Eric nailed him right between the eyes with an arrow." I follow behind them to gather our cloaks from the wagon. Sounds like someone needs help with their snares. I joke. It's a jibe aimed at big, strong Eric, who is supposed to be the best hunter, trapper, and tanner we have.
"What was that?"
Eric growls. I'd half expected him to ignore me since he's so good at it these days. I turn with a retort ready and waiting, but the glower on Eric's face is more protective than defensive. And I register Wyatt's sheepish expression. His averted gaze gives me pause, and I frown. Wyatt set the snare, not Eric. I know the look of self-loathing and shame on Wyatt's face all too well. "It happens to all of us," I say, loud enough for Wyatt to hear above the clatter of me lifting my things from the wagon. I hope he hears the apology in my voice, or sees it in my eyes when he finally looks at me, because I know my face is anything but soft and comforting. Wyatt nods the barest amount before he starts to clean Eric's arrow.
"Come on,"
Eric mutters.
"We're losing daylight."
He unsheathes his skinning knife, and as I shrug on my cloak, I watch the way Eric cuts into the boar without a second thought. Being the tanner's son, his knowledge of hides and animal meat isn't surprising, but his protectiveness and ease around Wyatt is. Or rather, it's intriguing. I must decide observing Eric and Wyatt working so well together is far more interesting than the mead and cloaks I came over for, because I stand there dumbly watching long enough for Eric to glance at me, his bloody hands stilling in the meat. He doesn't have to bark out a "get lost" or "what are you looking at?" I already know my presence is unwanted. That we've even managed to coexist in a silent truce the past 2 years is a miracle in and of itself. Deciding I better not press my luck, I sling my bag and Link's cloak over my shoulder and head back to the fire. With the sun barely visible beyond the sea, the wind bites at my nose and cheeks, and I nestle deeper into my cloak. Despite my strained relationship with Violet, I am never more grateful for her family's woolen wraps, scarves, and blankets as I am when I'm on these scavenging trips. Sleeping outside and walking through the sunken streets of what used to be San Francisco always proves to be bone-chilling. Uncorking the mead, my gaze shifts to Eric again, and I realize it's cold and unwelcoming in more ways than one. Chapter 8. I survey the shadowed corridor of the great sunken city. Once bustling from the gold rush, it's now a labyrinth of rust and ruin. Though much of it has been picked clean over the centuries, the storms have a way of unearthing things lost and forgotten, which is why we've come so soon after the last storm. As if conjured by my thoughts, a whirlwind of sand whisks through the air, making the city feel more like a graveyard of broken and battered things. I squint at a flicker of movement in the rubble, exhaling only when a black bird flits up and out of sight. The city provides many shadows and crevices for hiding, and just like we've come out from behind the protective walls of our village in search of metals and remnants of the past we can put to use, raiders troll the coastlines for new treasures as well. Link, I say, glancing at the glowing horizon, the sun is setting. We should make our way back to camp. He grunts behind me, distracted. I pat the netted sack slung over my shoulders, full of copper scraps and intact ceramics painted with intricate flowers, different from anything I've collected yet. We're out of room anyway. Just a minute, Link says, eyeing the archways and collapsed window frames barely poking out of the sand. The outermost section of San Francisco echoes of grandeur with dome-shaped roofs and colorful window glass, broken but remarkable. A stone face peers up from beneath the sand and splintered wood bits covering the ground, a decorative monument from a world that no longer exists. I don't know who the idolized people are, cast in granite and metals that have lasted lifetimes, but I imagine they were commemorated because of their grand plans and greed, causing the changing skies, the rising waters, and the weather that devoured everything during the shift. I've often wondered what it was like in the moments before the great wave leveled the city. Many had fled as the water level continued to rise, but there were many who stayed, refusing to leave their lives and all they knew behind. Were they resigned to their fate, or did they spend their final moments filled with regret and fear? A gull's shadow reflects on a piece of metal, and I tilt my head, squinting at the rusted sign protruding from crumbled brick. The words are faded. Book, bindery. I don't have time to consider what that is before Link taps my shoulder, pointing to what looks like an old apothecary shop, half buried in sand. Through the rotted window frame of what was likely an enticing storefront at one time, I see the green and blue glass bottle tops sticking out through the rubble. While any tinctures from before the shift would be useless, intact bottles and jars are invaluable. But it's the corner of a chest protruding from the sand my gaze lingers on. Axe gripped at my side, I follow Link and crouch to dig out the chest. It's small, a metal trinket box with a rusted latch. Using the butt of my axe handle, I knock the latch loose and lift the lid. The inside is lined with ruined red velvet, and a few rings glint in the dim light. I lift what looks like a torn ticket out of the shadows. 107 days passage. Sutton and Co's. Dispatch line for San Francisco. First class clipper ship. March. $100. I turn it over to find an image of a faded ship set against a sunset. All I can think is this person risked their life to come here, probably only to die with thousands of others in the flood. I eye a small folded paper with torn edges, slightly water damaged, and carefully, I open it. It's an advertisement for land. Escape the overcrowded city, build a home of your own, lots available in easy payments, possession within 30 days, fine lands for grazing, homesteading, agriculture. I watch Link as he digs at the bottles and wonder if one of our distant relatives lived here, Or maybe they never got around to buying that land. I close the chest and duck back out into the open air. Are you about done? I ask Link as I open my sack, knowing I can't possibly fit one more thing. Almost, he says. Somehow I manage to shove the chest in there and tug my sack closed again. Okay, well, movement at the old docks just beyond us catches my eye. I pause, heart pounding as I stare past the shipwrecks along the shoreline, at a crumbling cliff house. A large mass of fabric flutters in the wind, as if it blew in with the storm and snagged on something. Link, I murmur, I'll be right back. Brushing off a bottle, he shakes his head. Wait for me. I'll be fine, I tell him. I'm more worried about me. He lies. Even if he doesn't have a twitch in his cheek to give him away, I know him too well. I grin. I think an old sail got caught at the cliff house. We could use the fabric. In fact, it might be our best find of the entire day. Come when you're finished. If it's as big as I think it is, I'll need help folding it and bringing it in. I thought you said we didn't have room for anything else. I cut off his protest with a glare. Fine. He digs around another exposed bottle to find it broken. I might have found all the good ones anyway. I'll be right behind you. Not wanting to push my luck any longer in the setting sun, I leave my sack behind and head toward the cliff house. Impending darkness means we'll need torchlight soon, and the last thing we want to do is bring more attention to ourselves. I scour the debris caught in the old nets along the shoreline as I follow the ledge toward the cliff. I note a couple of trinkets to check out on the way back, but I return my attention to the sail. Only, as I carefully step inside the rickety cliff house, I realize it isn't only a sail stretched across the structure. Holding my breath, I freeze mid-step and grip my axe tighter. A line of brightly colored clothes with brass buttons that catch the dying light flaps in the wind. Every inch of my body coils with tension and fear, and my heart ceases to beat. Because sitting next to the sail is a youngish, brawny man with tanned skin and a buzzed head, mending part of the sail. A sharp, glinting blade leans against the barrel he sits on. Raiders. I see the prow of their ship through the holes in the building's shambles. I can't possibly take on an entire crew, nor do I wish to. As silently as possible, I step backward and out into the wind again, praying the man doesn't see me before I can get out of sight. I take one more step back, then another, and just as I step into the shadows and out of sight, I'm met with a hard body behind me. Squeezing my eyes shut, I pray it's Link. I'm prepared to silence him so we're not discovered. When I turn and peer up at a tanned face and into a pair of brown eyes so dark they appear almost black, they narrow, fixed on the scars marring my cheek, and the man's onyx curls catch in the breeze. I don't think, only act, and I swing my blade as the raider seems to stir from his own surprise. He ducks, pulling out two blades sheathed behind him. His muscles flex as he holds them in a defensive stance, but he doesn't swing back at me. My axe blade tears through the air once, twice, and the third time it nicks his side as he tries to evade me. He stills, glares down at the crimson staining his linen shirt, and though his eyes fix hard on me, he still makes no sound. I'm not sure why this man isn't trying to kill or capture me, but knowing there is a ship of raiders who will, I have to warn Link and the others. When the raider makes no move to lunge or strike me, I turn on my heel and run. There will be no comparing scavenged loot around the fire tonight or a leisurely journey home. Legs moving as fast as they will carry me, I run into the cloaking shadows of the sunken streets. Link! I slam into Eric. He curses and stumbles into Wyatt, but the crossness in his expression is replaced with apprehension when he sees the fear on my face. I shove him out of the way, though his big body barely moves, and his eyes bore into me. Raiders! I breathe, my blood whirring in my ears. I might be trained to fight them, but 6 of us are no match for an entire ship. One ship, at least. Eric's grip on my arm tightens, and his gaze shoots toward the pier, as if he can see through the crumbled city. They're headed north, I tell him, recalling the direction the prow was pointing. They're heading toward home. My eyes dart between him and Wyatt. We have to get there before they do. Chapter 9. Dawn crests the horizon, casting the morning in pale blue. Having watched the ship pass us hours ago, Link and I run as fast as we can toward home. Eric and Wyatt follow close behind, while the brothers bring up the wagon on the slower path, miles behind us. It doesn't matter that my throat burns and I can no longer feel my legs. There is no time to slow down. My stomach sinks at the thought of what might be happening in Ebonpeak this very moment. The devastation of our village, the scent of burnt remains lingering in the air in the wake of it. I think of my mother's cold, lifeless body and my father's retreating form. It all comes rushing back to me, only to be blotted out by the image of the tall raider's narrowed eyes and the menacing purse of his mouth. His eyes were shrewd and calculating. They unnerved me more than brutish swings or snarls would have if he had actually fought back. The way he moved away from my axe felt familiar. But all I can do is wonder if he'd intended to take me aboard as a slave. It's the only reason he could have had for not striking back at me as I'd tried to land one blow after another. And knowing they'd want slaves was all the more reason to get home. And I prayed we weren't too late. I think of the blacksmith and the other well-honed fighters we have. But more than them, I think of Gil. His arthritis will slow him down despite his expert skills. Violet and her parents will be nearly helpless. Wyatt's grandfather struggles to simply carry wood into his home, so how will he defend himself without our help? All of us have become too docile in the last 4 years without any raids. Whatever the raiders have come for, Ebonpeak will not go down without a fight, which is all that keeps my terror from crippling me completely. 40 miles feels more like 1,000 by the time we crest the hill to find the raiders' ship anchored in the cove. It's painted like a giant wooden dragon, with scales of faded reds and oranges, and this close inland, I see a carved snake-like figurehead jutting from the prow. The instant I register the serpent and the eagle's talons on the banner, whipping in the wind, my stomach curdles. Oaxacans, I gasp, dragging in a ragged breath. Link curses, and I pull my axe from my backstrap.
There are no rowboats.
Eric rasps beside us, trying to catch his breath.
They aren't anchored close enough to siege.
But the confusion in that is even more disturbing, and the 4 of us race for the gates of the village. Abandoning the path, we take the shortest route, hurtling over rocks and weaving around cypress. Raiders come from all around, but the Oaxacans are the reason my mother and most of our village was killed.
There are no battle cries,
Wyatt calls. I can barely hear him over the pounding of my boots on the ground. What are they waiting for? I rasp.
They aren't ashore yet,
Link says, running beside me. It's all that makes sense. My footsteps falter as we tumble into the village. What? I glance around frantically, and my head swims as I gasp for breath. Many of the villagers are out of their homes, clustered in groups instead of rushing about. It's as if something has already happened, as if we're too late. But there are no bodies on the ground, and there's no blood. No buildings are on fire, and only a hint of manure permeates the air. The lookouts had to have seen the ship. They had time to prepare for a raid, but their tools are sheathed in their work belts or discarded at their workstations. I see no weapons in hand, and no one is readying for anything. What are you all doing? I shout. Eric's father, Rory, and everyone within earshot stare at us. No. They stare at me. Why aren't you arming yourselves? I demand. I look at Link, shaking my head in a confused rage. What the hell is going on? Eric hurries to his father, and Link points to a dozen people huddled outside of the alehouse.
There's Violet,
he says. All of them are looking our way.
I'll meet you at my father's.
I didn't think I could be more alarmed, but everyone is staring at me with the same sympathetic look from the last time the Oaxacans were here, and the blood drains from my face. I watch as Eric's scowl deepens the longer his father speaks to him. Then Eric's eyes widen and shift to me. Oh no, I whisper. Gil. A new kind of terror grips me, one of uncertainty and mounting confusion, and I dash to the cottage. My legs are fatigued, my chest burning with fire after hours of nonstop running. But I don't slow, even if the immediate danger is still out at sea. Gil! I push through the door, but freeze in the threshold. A woman with long hair the color of midnight stands at the fire in the hearth, warming her hands. A mosaic of bright floral patterns etches the sides of her velvet cloak, and her tanned complexion is as exotic as any raider who makes their way from the tropics of the south. Her eyes meet mine, dark and arched by thick eyebrows, and I feel naked as her gaze slowly rakes over me. Heart still hammering in my chest, I frown and lower my axe, utterly confused. I'm about to ask her who the hell she is and what she wants. When I see him, the raider with the curly black hair, leaning against the back wall by the shuttered window. His ankles are crossed as he picks at something absently on his hand. You, I seethe. The wound on his side is covered by a leather vest. Samara, Gil says quietly from the table. I can barely tear my attention from the raider as Gil rises to his feet. My heart stops, my breathing catches, and my tongue and mind are a chaotically tangled mess, barely able to comprehend who I see across from him. No, I breathe. My father left a desperate man, determined to die in order to seek revenge. 6 years and he never returned. He has to be dead. But he's here, in front of me. His skin bronze, his shoulders broader, and his hair longer, grayer, and pulled back with jade beads. Like them. No, I try again and shake my head. He left us. He left me because of them. And now? Samara, Gil says again, taking a step closer. He holds his hand up, anticipating the maelstrom bubbling up inside me. I know this is Gil, my father says, almost reassuringly. The familiar rumble of his voice makes my eyes sting with tears. The floor creaks under him as he rises to his feet, and a silent conversation flashes between the two of them. It's all I can do to bite my tongue as my eyes shift around the room again. A raider stares back at me in my own home. A woman not from this place, who is too close to my father's age to be anyone else's companion, sends my mind reeling all over again. The cottage shudders in the wind as if it too is about to burst at the seams. It's then I realize the raider knew who I was at the cliff house. I shake my head with disbelief, but he looks amused more than anything, as if all of this isn't entirely backwards. Mara. My attention snaps to my father. No, I seethe. I point my axe at him to keep him where he stands. 6 years you've been gone. We thought you were dead. And now you return home with them? A ship of murdering raiders? Is that what you are now? I can barely keep the hysteria at bay. 6 years I've tried to forget him and move on. 6 years I've had to stomach my father abandoning me. 6 years I've tried to tell myself I'm worth something to someone, to Link and Gil, and even my father. My grip tightens on my axe, my nails biting into my palm. The way he stares at me with an indescribable emotion as he takes a step closer is all too much. He lifts his chin and his lips part. Samara, if... Shaking with fury, I press the head of my axe hard into his chest. Don't speak to me. Don't even come near me. I want to scream at him, to shout and maim him. Mar? Link calls from outside. His footsteps falter, and I feel his presence behind me. Notice the way the woman and the raider shift their attention to him, but my father's attention is solely on me. I take a step back, seeking the familiar warmth that's helped me keep my head above water all these years. Samara. My father starts again. His voice is commanding this time, making the little girl in me wince in his displeasure. But as the familiar burn of obedience and shame prickle over my skin, I shake it off, more resolved than ever. I, my father's own daughter, wasn't enough for him. Ever. He made sure I knew that every day before he left me behind with no family and a heart shattered into pieces. You have no power over me anymore, I say flatly, so cool and calm I surprise myself. You are nothing to me. You don't get to command anything of me, ever. You lost that right the day you left. My father's expression is hard and unchanged, but I'm not afraid of him anymore. Turning on my heel, I brush past Link, desperate to be as far away as possible from my life, unraveling all over again. But as I make my way through the village and out the gates, I feel the creep of hysteria spreading through me, suffocating me like vines over mortar. And I hate myself, even more than I hate my father, for allowing him to affect me. Again. Chapter 10. Angry shrieks tear through me with every swing of my axe. My arms quiver with fatigue, and red fills my vision, but I swing again, and again. I won't stop. I can't stop. The reality that awaits me back at the village makes it impossible to, because if I stop, I will crumble, and I won't let that happen. So I curse and swing some more, harder and more vehement. I relish the splintering driftwood and the strain of every muscle and fiber in me, begging to feel something other than anger and shame and hurt. Mar? Link's voice is tenuous as he walks up slowly behind me. I heave my axe again. Why is he back now? And with them? The storms are coming. We have enough to worry about without having to deal with him too. You have to talk to him. What? I wipe the sweat from my brow. Link stops next to my crass workmanship. I think you have plenty to say to him, and that, he says with a crumpled brow. He assesses the wood I've hacked to pieces. That's the worst piece of split lumber I've ever seen. What are you going to use it for? Because it's too shoddy for much. Licking my lips, I glance at the log for the first time. It was meant to reinforce the longhouse before Link and Violet's wedding celebration, but now it's firewood, I tell him, trying to save face, and I lean my axe against the wood haven. Fleetingly, I wonder if all of our hard work these past 6 years has been for nothing. If our reinforcing the walls of this place, maintaining the watchtowers, and logging the scorched forest has all been pointless. Because my father has returned and he's brought a ship full of raiders right to us. Brought raiders into our walls and into Gil's home. Unable to stand still with Link's gaze boring into me, I start up the hillside to the crumbling ruins we played on as children. The wild grasses brush against my legs as I stalk through them, and I hear Link's tentative steps behind me. I thought he was dead, he mutters. I can practically hear the gears overheating in his brain like mine are. I have so many questions. What, you didn't stay to chat about it? I grumble, glancing at the gray ruins of the old mission. I wonder how long I can stay out here before I have to go back and see that strange woman in our home and meet my father's far too familiar stare. No, I didn't stay. Abraham's gone with my father to deal with all the villagers' concerns. I can hear Link's frustration, and I'm glad I'm not the only one thwarted by all of this. In leaving me behind, my father left Gil and Link with another mouth to feed and person to worry about. That was on top of the decimated village. I make my way toward the crumbling wall. Hey, Link huffs. Will you slow down? I hear his ragged breath behind me, but my footsteps move faster. Samara! He bites out, and I glare over my shoulder at him. What, Link? He doubles over and pulls in a breath. It's not like we didn't just run through the night to get back here. Can you just slow down and talk to me, please? I finally stop, turning to face him. What am I supposed to say? I rasp. I'm so exhausted, I couldn't raise my voice even if I wanted to. That every part of my past, every single thing that haunts me is more alive than ever? That it feels like it's writhing inside me, like it's eating me away and I want to scream. I swore... My voice breaks and I squeeze my eyes shut, gritting my teeth. I swore I would never let him make me feel like this again. With sympathetic eyes, Link steps closer. He's so close, I see a speck of mud on his cheek from our rush to get back here. Mar. He reaches for me. Don't. I gently take his hand and let it fall away. You shouldn't be here, Link. He glowers. Why not? You know why. Link shakes his head. Because of Violet? Don't be stupid, Mar. You're my best friend. My head tilts of its own accord, staring into those dark eyes fringed with black that have always seen me when no one else has. I'm not leaving you alone. Not like this. Even if you just want to sit in silence, we'll sit. But you won't be alone. When I reach the upper remains of the old bell tower, I walk to the eroded walls, hollowed out by decades of storms, and peer into the thick, gray clouds of the horizon. We rushed back here for nothing, I say on an exhale. I'm not sure if I'd rather we were being raided. Don't say that. Link sidles up beside me, his shoulder nearly an inch taller, brushing mine as he squints out at the ocean. The raider ship is small and unassuming from up here, but it's there, taunting me. As the pressure in my chest cinches tighter, I lift my face, letting the wind tug at my hair as I breathe in. My fingers find the puckered skin on my cheek as they often do, and my chin quivers. It feels worse than it is, Link says, and when I look at him, he's watching me from the corner of his eye. His floppy black hair catches the breeze. It's longer, like when he was younger, and I remember the boy who wrapped his arms around me the day I realized what I'd done would never go away, when I would have done anything to disappear. I lean my head against his shoulder, feeling the recognizable ease in having Link beside me. What do you think he wants? I whisper. Link wraps his arm around my shoulders. His warmth eases the tension riddling every inch of me, just a little. Probably you, Link says softly. He left because of me, I remind him. He wouldn't come back for me. Link's hold tightens. No, he left because he was a mess, because he was angry and desperate and on a mission. Nothing could have stopped him. Not even his only child. The truth still stings, and I would rather assume my father died on a fool's mission than have him return as something he's always hated, inexplicably tied to the people that tore my family apart, to the people responsible for shattering my entire world. Chapter 11. The breeze stirs me awake. My neck is kinked from sleeping against Link's shoulder, and the unrelenting ache in my bones begs for more sleep after so much running. But as the shadows of evening descend behind the ruins, I hear someone walking toward us. Once again, reality floods through me, and all too quickly. It's my father. His approach is muted by the soft earth, but a memory dusts itself off from a holed-up place. Heavy footsteps creaking through the cottage, my mother chiding him to be quiet as I lay in my loft half asleep. My chest tightens as then and now coalesce, but unlike my childhood, each of my father's footsteps seem reluctant now, as if he might be holding his breath as much as I am. As Link stirs beside me, I brace myself for whatever comes next. Samara, my father calls up to me, his voice resigned. Link clears his throat and rises to his feet. He rubs his eyes before they meet mine regretfully. I should go. I want him to stay, but I know this is between my father and me. Link jumps from the crumbling stone staircase onto the ground with a thud, and as his footsteps recede into the evening, I squeeze my eyes shut. Grabbing my discarded axe, I inhale the deepest breath possible to steady my looming apprehensions and climb to my feet. My father is peering up at me from the ground below, but in the waning light, he doesn't look like the same man who left, and despite his graying beard and raider garb, he doesn't look as fearsome either. We must speak, he says. The edge to his voice is familiar, but he brushes a wisp of grass against his palm absently. My father's obvious discomfort and uncertainty is foreign to me, only confirming he most definitely is not the Abraham who left Ebonpeak 6 years ago. I can feel his eyes on me as I climb down from the ruins, but when I look at him, he averts his gaze. This close, and with the failing light illuminating his features, my father's face appears darker from years of sun and lined with age. He has more scars than before, and his brown eyes are tired, clearer than I remember, but shadowed with circles. As the breeze catches his graying hair and beard, an unfamiliar incense catches my nose, another unnecessary reminder he's been so far away from this place. He's more of a stranger than he is my father.
You still have Tidebreaker?
He muses, staring at the axe in my hand. He studies the new handle and the piece of abalone shell set in the leather strappings. My grip tightens on it before I sheath it at my back, pushing the painful memories of my mother away. I don't call it that anymore, I tell him. His eyes shift to mine fleetingly before he nods to the new craftsmanship.
The blade is sharp, and you made it your own. That's good.
It's infuriating that he tries to carry on so easily. I've needed a proper tool 100 times since you've left, so yes, it has a different handle and a sharper blade now too. I don't bother explaining that I've gone through 3 handles in the years he's been away, because I use my axe for nearly everything. It's been one of the only constants in my life.
Gil tells me you've been to the Scorched Forest many times too, that you've started to communicate with the people in the desert, that they left us a map.
Us? Maddened that I have to recount everything he's missed the past 6 years, I begin to walk. Yes, they left us a map. From what we can tell, it's the safest route to them, if we ever venture east. I eye his fancy clothes as he falls into step beside me. We wear blacks and grays and browns, wools and leathers crudely stitched together in a way that's practical and inconspicuous. His leather vest is embellished with brass buttons, his belt embroidered with colorful threads. His tunic and even the few beads in his beard are worn and faded, but colorful all the same. He drips with excess. I think we can agree much has changed since you left, I mutter, and I expect him to chide me for my tone or glower at me, but he can barely look me in the eye, and when he finally does, his features soften slightly. For the first time in my entire life, I see pain instead of hardness. Good.
I know you are angry, Samara.
He starts, his voice gruff but not unkind.
But there are things that must be said.
He stares toward the village. I know his words won't sway my anger, but my curiosity outweighs my obstinance. I want to know where he's been, who these people are he's brought into our home, and why. After so many years, he has returned. And what happened to the dozen men that left with him? Did everyone but him die in his rash quest for vengeance?
I knew coming back would raise alarm.
He starts, clasping his hands behind his back as we walk in slow, steady strides.
And I'm not only speaking about the villagers. Perhaps that is why I've been putting it off for so long.
He peers around the rocky hillside, eroded by centuries of assailing winds, then out at sea and up into the darkening sky. He looks everywhere but at me.
But too much time has passed, and so much has changed. I knew I must return. I don't expect you to believe me, not after the way I left. However,
my father glances at me, his eyes lingering on my scars before he peers out at the surrounding landscape again.
I have come back for you, Samara,
he says into the wind. My heart twists at his words, and I swallow the emotions forming in my throat. I hate how close they sit to the surface.
Everything I've done these past 6 years, every place I've sailed, everything I've accomplished, has been so I could come back for you, feeling pride in something.
I nearly laugh at his words, as impossible as they seem, and yet I'm surprised by the comfort and satisfaction that needle their way in alongside my disbelief. The brightly sewn patches on the loose sleeves of his shirt billowing in the evening breeze, seemed to mock me. "You became a raider for me?" I ask dryly. My father is silent for a moment before he explains. "After we left, when Andrik spotted the same ship that breached our shores in a port outside of Baja, I knew it was my chance at retribution. We befriended some of the locals, many of them living in fear of the raider captain whose men commandeered their shores during storm season, growing fat off their resources and terrorizing their women. We stayed there for weeks, learning everything we could about them. The captain was Javier Gutierrez, a man whose family sailed to Oaxaca centuries ago to conquer the Mexicans. His entire bloodline has been raiders of sorts, even before the shift. They, and many others, wanted everything the rich lands of the southern continent offered, especially as all industry and opulence began to perish everywhere else. And when I learned Gutierrez used their port between raids, I knew we had time to strategize a plan." "You left with vengeance in your eyes, yet you waited months to kill him and his men?" I shake my head. "Then you kept his ship?" Who is this man beside me? He's not a woodsman and builder. He's not a village leader. He is nothing like my father, and I don't trust him.
"It was Andrik who convinced me to wait,"
he continues, and it almost sounds as if he's ashamed.
"While I cared nothing for living, our small crew wanted to return to what was left of their families eventually. So, we waited an entire season for Gutierrez to return, and we defeated him with the help of the locals, who would see him and his men banned from their shores."
"You formed a raiding party of your own," I think aloud. My father peers at the ship beyond the cliffs as we near the village.
"We were determined not to let Gutierrez and his men take more than they already had from us."
My father bends down to pick up a broken shell that made its way up here in the recent storm.
"Once Gutierrez was dead, however, and I had a crew of my own, I did not feel at peace as I'd hoped I would. I'd planned to die fighting him, but instead was left standing with only Andrik and Nance, and with no purpose."
His words cut deeply, but I am not surprised by them. Had I ever been a part of my father's purpose, he would not have left, intent to die, to begin with.
"A group of 12 men sailed with me to Oaxaca, to Gutierrez's city of riches. I wanted to do to his family and his people what they have always done to us northerners, trapped between the sea and the scorched forest."
"But," I prompt, thinking of the Mexican woman warming her hands against the fire in Gil's hearth. He glances at me, his face shadowed in the onslaught of night.
"When I arrived in Oaxaca, I realized how similar his people were to ours, men and women trying to survive. Their city had many nice things, of course, but Gutierrez didn't bring wealth back to his people. He hoarded it. He kept it for his men and for himself, and when I met his family, I knew I could not hurt them, not with the loss of my own still haunting me, not while knowing that, like my wife and child, they were innocent."
My father walks silently for a moment before continuing.
"His wife had no control of his ventures out at sea, and the more I learned about his people and their way of life, the more peace I felt, seeing what was possible for ours, for you, if I could only take you away from this place."
"You mean to take me south to the Raiders' city?" I laugh bitterly. Then you have wasted your time. I tell him, I will never go there with you. I could never live a life of luxury knowing the blood of innocents were spilled to get it. I glance at him. You would have said the same thing once.
"I have not raided innocent villages, Samara. My crew, we find other raider ships. We hear stories from towns and ports as far as the southern continent, and learn of those who take instead of trade, and we find them."
I stop just outside the village, staring at the ship's outline in the inky darkness. I try to reconcile my father's two lives. I see him as he was, and I try to understand him now. But he is a stranger standing beside me. He's always been a victorious fighter and protector. But a pirate hunter? She is his wife, I realize, my heart sinking a little. And the other man, the raider? I see the resemblance between the two of them now, the black hair and eyebrows, the round cheeks. He is Gutierrez's son. My father says nothing, but his silence is as sharp as a blade. You have his wife, his son, and his ship, I say with a humorless laugh. They are your family now. My chest aches, though I try to ignore my heart breaking all over again. I don't want to care that he's replaced me and my mother, but I do. While I've spent hours, days, and nights longing to have my family back, he's been creating a new one.
You are my family too, Samara. You're the reason I've come back.
I shake my head, but he continues.
When we return to Oaxaca, I want you with us. We'll bring everyone who wants to join.
My father points to his ship.
Life is better south of here, Samara. There are storms, yes, torrential rains and earthquakes and volcanoes, but they have no lightning storms to hide from. The land is rich and...
There are no memories. I finish for him.
No, there aren't.
He admits. I study my father's profile, relieved I can't see whatever emotions are in his eyes, because I'm not sure I can take any more revelations tonight. I want to hate him for everything he's done. And while a part of me will never be able to forgive him for leaving me with a life of want and loneliness, another part of me believes he wants to make things right. And I hate how much I yearn for it, how much it hurts. And your new family has come with you, I say. Why? Because your wife didn't look pleased to be here, nor to see me. The woman's stark expression earlier makes my skin prickle. Her son, on the other hand, knew exactly who I was the moment he saw me in the old city. I can't help but imagine what my father told him about me.
She'll have monstrous scars from cheek to chin. You can't miss them. Isa is not my wife,
my father says, drawing me back to him. But his words are cagey, and I know well enough that she is his wife in all ways that matter.
And yes, she has been tense since learning we would sail here. But she and Raf are very close.
He pauses a moment.
Isa is distrusting of new people, but she will come around, just as I hope you will. Life hasn't been kind to any of us.
It feels like I'm missing something. You killed her husband, I point out. Shouldn't she hate you? Shouldn't she think you a monster?
He was not a kind man,
my father offers.
There was no love lost when she learned of his death. She was angry and afraid at first, and rightly so. She had a son to care for with no husband to protect them.
Until you, I mutter, feeling a wave of jealousy.
Raphael is a good man, Samara, and Isa is a hard woman, guarded in all she does, but she is shrewd and can be tender in her own way. I don't expect you to look at her as a mother, but maybe you two could find common ground and become friends.
My father waits for me to say something, but I have nothing to say. I don't even know what to think with so much swimming around in my head, and that my father finally has the son he has always wanted makes it even more difficult to stomach. He follows me through the gates of the village. The blacksmith still clinks in his shop, and the pathways are lit with torchlight as people mill around, closing everything down for the night.
The village has changed,
my father muses.
And there are more lightning rods.
Because there have been more accidents, I say absently, walking back to Gil's. Scavenged metal from the old city is a priority now. My father's steps falter slightly.
You go to the city?
I turn to him. You sound surprised. My voice is flat, and I glance at the people's curious faces, watching us through lit windows as we pass. You always wanted me to work hard and contribute, to earn my place here, didn't you? Once again, his stride matches mine, and we walk through the village. I don't want to go home and see the others, but I'm not sure where else to go.
Gil warned me you are not the same little girl I left behind.
My father mutters, and there's a tinge of amusement in his voice I've never heard before.
I expected as much, but...
But what? I stop to face him. He meets me stare for stare in the flicker of a torch flame, before his eyes shift to my scars and he averts his gaze once more.
You are stronger than I expected,
he says.
Your mother would be proud of you.
I am what I need to be to survive this place. I am no different than Link or...
Gil said there has been only one raid since I left.
I nod. It was not as bad as Desolation Day, but we lost 9 people.
It could have been worse,
he muses. Could it? I bite out. There are nearly more orphans and elderly that live in this village than able bodies. Despite my words, I know it could always be worse. While we're primed and ready for another, one raid in 6 years is nothing compared to the ships full of raiders that have stormed the shores in decades past. My eyes snap to my father, and suddenly I understand. You're the reason there have been less ships, I realize aloud. You and your men. At least my father has the decency to look humble as he slightly dips his chin.
And some others,
he says.
Not every raider wants to maim in order to eat. It is the weather we must protect ourselves from, and the changing tides. The more people work together, the easier it will be to not only survive, but to prosper.
What a noble quest, I say curtly. My father is no saint, no matter what new path he finds himself on. But I can't fault him for his efforts either, knowing the scant villages dotting the northern coast are safer because of them. My father ignores my snideness and stops at the longhouse. The doors are open and his men clank around inside, muttering in Spanish and laughing. A couple of them file out, giving my father a brusque nod as they head for the gate. Like him, the men look weather-worn and tired.
They are unloading the goods we brought with us,
my father explains.
There's to be a feast tonight.
An unspoken question lingers in the air between us, and another man steps out of the longhouse, younger than the others, with sinewy muscles and a scruffy face. He glances at me, his eyes flickering in the torch shadows as he passes, before he looks at my father. 3 trunks left, he says in an English that sounds foreign to me. My father nods, and the man continues about his duties.
We have brought supplies for the village, he tells me, and some food. I wish for people to get to know my men and learn what we have about the world over the years.
Again, we share a silence, but only for a heartbeat.
Will you come to the feast?
He asks.
Eat some food and get to know Issa and Raf.
It's almost dizzying standing beside my father, who has spoken more to me in the past hour than he probably ever has in my life. I peer past the low roofs of the cottages and shacks that stagger the incline of the hill, toward Gil's, our old home, in the lot beside it. When my father left, our cottage sat empty for nearly 2 years because we thought he might return. But I could not go in it again, not without seeing my mother dead on their bed, or remembering the desperation I felt in those final moments with my father. Now it's weather-beaten, empty, and barely standing. And my father is back, no longer weighed down by misery, while I have been fighting it since the day he left. Still, somewhere deep in my heart, the brambly mess of the past slackens, just a little. He has come back for me. It's a truth I can't quite accept or fully understand. Unable to tear my gaze from the longhouse and whatever awaits me inside, I finally nod. I will come. Chapter 12. My father and I part ways. He follows the rest of his men to the beach to finish unloading La Condesa, as he'd called it, and I head to the cottage to change out of my 2-day-old clothes. Rupert, one of our farmers, eyes me curiously as I make my way up the path toward home, and I know it's because he and everyone else want to see how I will handle my father's return, especially with his new friends in tow. But it's easy enough to ignore him and the other sets of eyes I feel boring into me, since I've pretended not to notice or care about their gawking the past 6 years. I'm unpredictable to them, and an oddity of sorts, and I'm mostly used to it. When I reach the cottage, it's dark. Gil is gone, likely helping the others prepare for the feast, or it's possible he's reassuring those who are still wary of my father's return that all will be well. But even I can't say I'm convinced of that. I stare longingly at the unlit fire, shrouded in night shadows, and long to kick my feet up and bask in the firelight with a mug of ale. It's only then that I realize how disgusting I am. It's barely been 2 days, but I smell as if I've been gone a week. Cringing, I grab clean trousers and a vest from my trunk and snatch a well-worn bar of lye and violet oils to take to the tide pools. I consider leaving my axe at the cottage, but immediately decide against it. While I partially trust my father, I don't trust any of his men. Latching the cottage door behind me, I take the back route toward the east gate of the village, closer to the water. Though my father's men are likely still unloading their goods, the tide pools are far enough away and hidden from the pier. I can sneak down there unseen. As full darkness descends, I rely on the rising moon to light the way, and the moment I reach the sand, I stop to remove my boots. There's something about the beach that calms me, so I take my time walking to the tide pools, reveling in the sand sifting between my toes and tickling the bottoms of my feet. Hearing a sea lion off in the distance, I wonder if there could ever be a more comforting place than this. Perhaps it's the closeness of the waves and the rhythmic sound of them crashing against the cliffs that soothes me, a song of sadness or steady reassurance. Or maybe I love the beach because it's home to my brightest memories, all of them with my mother. And down here, with the breeze carrying the saline tinge of the sea, it feels like a comforting embrace that eases my muscles in a way nothing else can. Not my bed or one of Gil's famous shoulder rubs. Not the secluded ruins on the hill or even Link's arms during the stolen moments in our past. A few men laugh as their rowboat reaches shore down the beach, and my eyes fix on the ship still anchored out at sea. I wonder how many men my father has brought back, and for how long, exactly, they will all remain. Unnerved by their presence, I hurry around the rocks to the tide pools, out of sight. Pulling my hair from my rumpled braids, I let it fall loose and long against my shoulders and down to my back, grab my lye bar, and walk around the tide pools onto the sand banked between the rocks. The moon glints off the waves as they lap at the shore, and the tepid sea water washes over my toes, sending an excited shiver up my spine. I drape my clean clothes on the rocks and undress, excited by the promise of water kissing my skin. I want to wash the entire day away. The past 6 years, if it were possible. When I'm deep enough, I close my eyes and submerge myself completely. The water undulates around me, tugging at my hair and rushing over my skin as it recedes, only to swallow me whole again. I let the waves toss me back and forth a moment before coming up for air. Salt clings to my lips, and I blink my eyes open, imagining a life atop the waves, like that of the raiders, instead of in them. I'm not sure how long I float and swim, coming up for air only as needed. I scrub myself clean, feeling weightless in the water and free. When I'm shed of the day enough to suit me, I leave my refuge behind and walk to shore slowly, so that the water drips from my skin and the breeze dries me a little. Tossing the soap onto my soiled clothes, I comb my fingers through my hair, and once I work through the tangles, I braid it away from my face. Satisfied it's tight enough against my scalp, I tie the end with leather cord and buckle my vest. The calf skin is smooth and well-worn, molded to my torso perfectly. I'm about to tug my trousers on when I hear the scuff of a boot over rocks, and I glance across the tide pools. The raider with curly black hair stops in the shadows, his eyes widening slightly in the moonlight as he notices me. Raphael. My jaw tightens at the sight of him. His gaze doesn't linger on my body, so I don't bother scurrying for my pants to cover myself under his scrutiny, the way I instinctively want to in his presence. Instead, I stand taller as he focuses on my face, the same way he had at the cliff house. I don't like the advantage he has, knowing so much about me, or that he's just standing there studying me. "Can I help you?" I grit out. What might have been a glint of surprise in his eyes upon finding me darkens, and his brow furrows. I search the shadows behind him, wondering if there are more of them coming. "Your ship is the other way," I point out. "Yes, well, I was exploring," he says dryly, and I wonder if he was exploring or watching, because something that looks like amusement plays on his features. "Well," I gesture down my half-dressed body, "did you get a good eyeful? Or are you going to watch me put on my pants and boots too?" Raphael smirks, tosses a shell, or whatever he absently plays within his hands, into the sand and continues past me without a second glance. I glare at the rock face he disappears around, deciding I definitely don't trust him. When I finally dress and make my way from the shielded cove, my dirty clothes balled under my arm, I walk around the tanning shack toward the path leading up the cliff. Only as I pass the shack do I register the silhouette of someone inside, and I stop. Eric steps from the shadows, watching me and wiping his hands with a rag. I sigh with relief, but don't stick around long enough to have any sort of standoff with him. I have far bigger issues to worry about tonight. Eric and I can glare at one another later. Chapter 13. By the time I arrive at the feasting hall, the festivities are well underway. I dawdled at the cottage, dealing with my dirty clothes, putting off whatever surprises I'm certain will come next. The long house smells of sunburnt leather, the sharp stench of sweat and ale. Even with the stone hearth unlit, the hall is warm, almost viscous inside. The entire village seems to be present, and at least 100 bodies fill nearly every inch of it. The tables are cluttered with food and drinks. Some people are hunkered around them for a night of conversation. Harsh, unfamiliar sounds and syllables mixing with voices I've heard all my life, while others cluster in groups between them. Wrought iron candelabras line the wood-planked walls, making the entire longhouse glow, and the shimmering contents of the chests near the entrance catch my attention. I stop beside an open one that boasts colors and riches from another world. It's filled with metal bracelets, adorned with jade and vibrant gems I've never seen. Beaded necklaces and embroidered bright fabrics spill out of it. Foreign dolls shaped like strange animals peer back at me, and intricately painted jugs and bowls fill some of the others. Boisterous laughter carries through the hall, and when I look up, my curiosity fizzles. My father sits on the other side of the room, his elbows resting on the table as he drops a hunk of meat onto his tray, chuckling. I've rarely ever seen my father smile, and only when he was with my mother. Now he's laughing? I bite my tongue as his reappearance in Ebonpeak lands one more gutting blow, but I refuse to let my eyes cloud with tears, and with an unsteady breath, I search the hall for Link. Everyone in the longhouse has settled into a cautious sort of truce among so many new faces. While the raiders have taken to a few of the tables on one side of the room, the villagers seem to have claimed the rest. Absent are Link and Violet.
"You look like you're enjoying yourself."
I roll my eyes as Eric steps up beside me. "Not likely," I mutter. He takes a drink from his mug, and our eyes meet briefly. His shimmer from too much drink, and though it's fleeting, I think his gaze softens on me, just a little. With sympathy? That can't possibly be right, and we both seem to realize it and peer back into the throng of people.
"What's he really doing back here?"
Eric asks. I don't overthink the sincere concern in his voice and huff an uncertain laugh instead. I have no idea. No? His skepticism is hard to miss, but instead of answering, I survey the room. It's disconcerting to have Eric standing so close, as if we've ever stopped to have a cordial conversation before. It's easily forgotten as my gaze lands on my father again, sitting with his companions, Gil and a few men from the village among them. What does your father think about all of this? I ask Eric, nodding to where Rory sits across from mine. Eric looks at me, his brown eyes a liquid copper in the candlelight. His expression is slightly softer than usual, but not openly warm either.
"My father trusted Abraham with his life before he left,"
he says, which shouldn't surprise me. Most villagers did. My father was strong as an ox, honest and hardworking, loyal to a fault. He worked his hands until bleeding.
My father believes Abraham has returned to help us.
I can feel Eric's eyes on me, watching me closely. I expect a sneer to tug at his lips when his gaze lands on my scars, but he looks away instead.
But I take it you don't.
All I can do is shrug. It's not as if I really knew my father before he left, so I don't pretend to know his intentions now, especially as I watch him lean into Issa, whispering something into her ear. That earns him a smile from her, even if it's slight, and he pours her another cup of what looks like wine from a red-painted jug. Issa pushes away her plate, her meat and potatoes barely touched, and takes a hearty sip of her drink. Despite her guarded smiles, she looks bored, as if she'd rather be 1,000 miles from here. Still, I can't help but admire her thick, dark hair, half of it wrapped in intricate braids with beaded clips on the crown of her head, the rest falling in long waves down her back. I've never seen a woman draped in so much richly colored fabric. She reminds me of a queen. She's stunning, and I can see why my father has decided to keep her. Because that's what this all feels like, my father's spoils of war. And after a lifetime of fighting for something, he appears to have everything.
Your new mother looks less than pleased to be here,
Eric mutters. And though I know he's teasing, something in me snaps. My body moves before I can comprehend my fist clenching the lapel of his vest, and the feel of his hard chest against my hand, heaving in surprise. Don't. I growl in warning. I don't care that the room falls silent. Eric looks regretful, but only for a split second before his eyes, unfocused with drink, harden and he pushes me away. Why do you always have to be such a dick? I ask, and I hate the hurt in my voice. I shouldn't care what Eric thinks. I never have before. But somehow, the weight of every second and minute and hour that passed seems to settle in my throat, and I have to swallow it away. Eric clenches his jaw, but says nothing as he brushes past me, and the room of onlookers goes about their chatting and laughing once more. My pulse beats in my ears, and I try to exhale my surmounting discomfort. I don't want to be a part of this celebration, and I'm about to leave when Andrik comes out from behind the screen by the hearth with a fresh platter of meat from my father's table. His beard is cut close around his face, which is thinner than I remember, but I know that smile. He's a familiar face in a sea of change, and the moment he spots me, his cheeks lift with a grin. I smile as we make our way toward each other, weaving through the mass of people that seem to fill the hall to near bursting. "Samara," he says happily. Like my father, his leathers are engraved with intricate designs, studded with stones, and his shirt sleeves billow as he wraps his arms around me. "Andrik," I breathe, feeling another swell in my throat. "You've grown," he chuckles in my ear, squeezing me tighter. "So have you," I tease. And when I pull away, I pat his belly, though I'm only playing. He is fit and strong like my father, likely from years out at sea. He's no longer the pale, grieving father and husband I knew after Desolation Day, but more full of life than I ever thought possible. "Are you happy to be home?" I ask, nodding to the daughter he left behind, newly married to Brahm, the healer. "Yes, it's been too damn long," he says with a contented sigh, but his eyes shift over me as if he can't quite reconcile the sight. He smiles, softer this time, taking me in from face to booted toe. That he doesn't linger on my scars eases a tension in my shoulders I didn't realize I was carrying. "You are a comely thing, just like your mother." His voice is light and kind, and my rib cage seems to cinch around my lungs ever so slightly. Andrik grips my shoulder as he looks into my eyes, his expression more serious. "Your father has wanted to return for a very long time," he says, and it sounds as if it's meant to be a comfort. I scoff. "He told you that?" Another small smile lifts his cheeks. "He didn't have to." His tone thickens and lowers, despite the boisterous voices surrounding us. "The moment we left, I knew a part of him regretted it." Andrik leans closer. "Don't be too hard on him, if you can help it," he says, his breath warm against my ear. He's been through hell. I'm not sure why his words surprise me, but they do. Come. Andrik nods toward my father's table. Sit and eat. While Hector and Isa were mending our sail from the storm, your father and I caught a few boar in the hills beyond the sunken city. The meat's quite good, if I do say so myself. He flashes me a self-satisfied smirk. I've become quite the chef since you last saw me. I search the hall again for Link, my lifeline, and when I finally find him, sitting with Violet and her family at one of the tables, laughing, I ignore the hollow churn of my stomach and follow Andrik toward my father. When he spots me approaching, he has a muttered exchange with one of his men before the raider stands and gathers his tray. He's the one I saw mending the sail. He's tall, almost looming, with broad shoulders and lighter features made more prominent by his shorn head and strong jaw. A scar nicks one of his tawny eyebrows, over eyes that are almost golden. Though he's far closer to my age than my father's, he's intimidating. The raider dips his chin and gestures to his place at the table. I'm too busy taking in his presence to say anything before he steps away. Thank you, I finally manage. And I notice what looks like a whip scar creeping out of the collar of the raider's shirt before he disappears into the crowd. That's Hector, Andrik says, leaning in. Don't let his size fool you. He's the best of us, in truth. A good man. A loyal man. Andrik motions for me to sit in the vacated seat. Gutierrez brought him back from a raid when he was a boy, as a slave, and companion for his son. I frown, searching for Hector in the crowd again. He doesn't look like a slave. That's because he and Raph are thick as thieves, Andrik says. There is no such distinction between them now. Slaves. Tyrannical ship captains. Raiders. I try to grasp all of it as my thoughts drift back to Raph and me at the cliff house. I would have rather died than be a raider's slave, and though Hector was fortunate, how many haven't been? As I stare at my father, I wonder how many slaves he has in his wondrous city. Andrik pats my shoulder, and as he heads into the back again, I take a seat. Rory, sitting beside me, smells of stale beer and laughs at something my father says with far too much amusement before he downs what's left in his mug. And while Gil's presence beside him is slightly reassuring, it's Issa's gaze I feel boring into me. My eyes lock with hers. They're the color of burnt earth, and I bristle under her scrutiny. I open my mouth to say something I'll likely regret when my father's conversation with Rory comes to a standstill. I'm glad you've come, my father says, and there's a flash of relief in his eyes before he averts his gaze. Isa, this is my daughter. He pauses, as if he's bracing himself. Samara. Isa takes a sip from her cup, eyeing me over the brim. I stare back. Abruptly, Rory rises from his seat, stirring the tension that's fallen over the table, and he stumbles away. I take a mug from the center of the table, filling it before I chug it down. Perhaps if I drink as much as Rory, I won't mind everyone's eyes on me as much. Your father told me your hair is the color of the setting sun, Isa finally says, and reluctantly, I find her husky accent beautiful. She lifts a thick, black-as-night eyebrow. He was not wrong. Though the words could be a compliment, they sound more like an observation. Eat, Andrik says, and though I startle as he sets a tray of food in front of me, I'm grateful for the interruption. Don't be shy, he chuckles. None of us are. I study the other men, tearing meat between their teeth and wiping their mouths with the backs of their hands. I tell myself I'm not hungry at first, that I'm too knotted up inside to eat. But as I pick at my food and swallow the savory meat, my stomach rumbles, suddenly ravenous. A warm body plops down in Rory's empty seat beside me, and a spicy scent fills my nose. When I look at whose shoulder is brushing mine, I see Raph. Isa pours him a mug of ale, not wine like she's drinking. This is my son, Raphael, she says proudly. His eyes flick from his mother to me as he tears a piece of boar meat with his fingers. He plops it in his mouth and sucks the juices off his thumb. We've met, he says after a swallow, and tears another piece from the bone, this time with his teeth. His accent is slight compared to his mother's. I plop another savory chunk into my mouth, watching him closely. I'm not sure if it's the arrogance that exudes from him or his complete nonchalance after our run-ins, but he's irritating. That's obvious enough. "How's your side, by the way?" I say tersely and glance down at his fresh tunic. There's no sign of his wound, but I know it's under there, and it has to hurt. I feel Issa's attention fixed on me as she sips her wine. "You two have already met?" When I look at her, she's staring at her son, a bit perturbed. Raph lifts his eyebrow wryly and takes another bite. "Oh, you mean that scratch?" he says, ignoring his mother. "I barely felt it." I shake my head with a victorious smile. Liar. His mother gasps as she puts the pieces together. "That was you?" Her eyes widen momentarily. Then she glares at her son. "You told me it was a wild animal." "What?" I glower at him. Raph only shrugs. She moved like one." I clench my fist so tight my fingernails cut into my palms, ignoring his slight because I know I'm a good fighter, one of the best in the village. I shake my head. "You knew exactly who I was, but you said nothing." Raph chuckles at that, licking his lips. They are full and shimmer in the flickering candlelight. "And what would I have said to you?" Finally, he looks at me, his gaze sparkling with amusement. I clench my fist tighter to prevent myself from punching the smugness off his face. One of the other men says something to him, pulling Raph into conversation as he continues to shovel food into his mouth. The more he eats, the more I want to hit him over the head with the bones he's picking clean. But I refrain and appraise my father and Issa as they slip into easy conversation. I notice the way he rests his hand on her thigh, almost as if he's reassuring her, and it must be common practice because she doesn't seem to notice. My mind begins to wander as I imagine them living together in a grand house filled with slaves and foreign scents. "What are those markings?" Raph asks, eyes flicking to me. He draws what looks like veins or branches in the air with a glistening finger. "I see them on some people's skin." My eyes seek the blacksmith, sitting with Wyatt and Eric 2 tables over. "They're lightning scars," I mutter, pulling a piece of boar meat off with my fingers. "They were struck by lightning?" Raph balks, his finger still just before his lips, nearly dropping his meat. "And didn't die?" "Some people do." I chew my bite of boar. It's cold, but slick against my tongue and tastes of rosemary and thyme. "I've never heard of someone living from such a thing." Raph muses, staring at the blacksmith. His scar inches up his neck, diverging in different directions like leafless branches, far more intricate and beautiful than mine. "Lightning storms stretch for days, sometimes weeks during the summer. There's only so much we can do to escape them. I'm surprised you chose now to sail here, at the beginning of the season. You're in for a rude awakening these next few months." Raph snorts. "We're not staying for months." This time I laugh. "Then you'll likely die at sea." His cocky smile twitches and falls, and his brow lowers. He's completely clueless as he stares at me, no longer amused. "The storms are far more dangerous at sea than they are on land," I tell him. "Last year, a whale washed ashore after being struck, as if we needed the reminder." I wait for that to sink in. There is a reason we spend the winter months preparing for storm season, why our fishermen don't go far from home, our storehouses are stocked with food, and our buildings are as protected as possible. Raph looks at his mother, who I hadn't noticed was listening, but her scowl is far more terrifying than his. "I'm surprised my father didn't warn you," I say, because no matter how much he has changed, he would never risk such a thing. Gripping my father's arm, Issa pulls his attention from Gil. He stares at her claws, pressing into his forearm. As she says something I can't hear over the conversations and laughter in the hall. He looks at me, then at Raph, both of us watching them. "Yes, it's true," my father tells Issa, meeting the heat of her gaze. "I did not expect the season to arrive so early, but staying a couple months is no detriment." He pats Issa's hand, but she's slow to loosen her grip as she looks at Raph. Her expression is indiscernible again, but Raph looks more menacing than the first time I laid eyes on him. Brusquely, Issa rises, pours herself another mug full of wine, and excuses herself from the table. When my father rises to go after her, Raph stands as well. "I'll speak with her," he says, and he abandons his plate, disappearing into the crowd behind her. Resting my elbows in front of me, a small, vindictive sigh escapes my throat. It seems I'm not the only one whose world has been turned upside down today. I pour myself more ale. Well, I say, and look at my father. I lift my mug to cheers no one in particular for such a happy reunion, and take a few gulps, then some more, until my mug is empty. I lick my lips. This is going to be interesting. Chapter 14. The next morning, I arise with the muted light of day. Strangely, Gil is already gone, or it's possible he never came home after the feasting hall. I tried to remember how many mugs of ale I drank before coming in last night. Desperately in need of darkness and quiet, I'd headed for my loft and remember nothing else. Luckily, my mind is only slightly muddled, because despite my exhaustion, there's plenty of work to do today. And as I peer out the window at the storm clouds churning over the ocean, I know it's only a matter of time before the rainstorm hits us. I dress quickly and head to the wagon, left by Fergus's barn. Had my father not shown up and sent everything into chaos, I would have already sorted through my finds from the sunken city. Was it only yesterday morning we returned? It feels longer ago than that. Exhaling, I scratch Fergus behind the ears as he sticks his head through the fence, and notice the guys already took the metal and copper items to disperse as needed. The last thing we need is another fire breaking out in the village. That's one disadvantage to using wood for everything. Fire likes it, especially with a constant breeze to feed it and help it spread. But metals, despite their many uses and conveniences, are far more dangerous. After an hour of sorting passes, I've categorized the scavenged items by trade and necessity. The ceramics and glass are grouped together, wrapped as delicately as I can manage with burlap, and situated in my knapsack. I haul it over my shoulder, hugging a ceramic pot to my chest with my other arm. I head down the road to the village, fanning out around me. Though some people move about their morning as usual, there aren't many townspeople out yet, probably regretting last night's festivities. I stop at Cynthia's greenhouse first. It's quaint, with glass walls that glint in the dingy morning, and her yellow paint-chipped door is already open to let in the breeze. Greenery drapes the interior, an array of luxuriant leaves, some with plum purple veins that look otherworldly. A curtain of foliage hangs from the wooden beam stretching across the peak of the ceiling, where shelves are suspended like wooden planks. Flowers bud in some of the potted bushes lining the walls, but it's the herbs Cynthia is tending to this morning. She kneels on the ground, soil covering her hands and apron. Hearing my approach, Cynthia peers up through brown lashes, and her crystal blue eyes glitter as she smiles at me. "Good morning, Samara." She brushes off her hands as she rises to her feet. "I didn't expect to see you this morning." I set the ceramic pot clutched to my chest on her work table. "I found this half buried in the city," I explain. "It has a few chips in it and a small crack, but I figured it could be useful, perhaps even mendable." "Yes, it's perfect. Thank you." She spins it around, nodding with satisfaction. "I was looking for something to repot the peppers in. I'm determined to cultivate them." Cool season crops have always been easiest for us to grow, not because it is cold in Ebonpeak, but because it is so moist for most of the year. My mouth clamps shut as Gil walks out from behind the curtain, separating her home from the greenhouse. His black hair is spiky and unkempt, and his clothes are rumpled, as if he's just woken up. Like this, with his slanted eyes soft and his lips curved with ease, Gil reminds me of Link, content and young again. The instant Gil notices me standing there, his cheeks redden, and I have to school my smile. "Samara," he says, clearing his throat. "I thought you'd still be asleep, recuperating." Finally, my grin gives way. It's impossible not to smile at his obvious discomfort. "Yes, well, I am feeling well enough," I tell him. "There are things to do today, regardless of my father upsetting life around here." I already knew something was going on between Cynthia and Gil. I've seen the way they are together, all stolen glances and platitudes, but I hadn't realized it had progressed to more than flirting. If anyone deserves to be happy, it's Gil. A dead wife and daughter, raising his son and an orphan thrust upon him as a single father, and with age sneaking up on him after years of unrest. Some companionship doesn't seem like too much to ask for. Well, I say, taking a step backward. My eyes meet Gil's one last time before I turn to leave. It's time to make more deliveries. Thank you, Samara, Cynthia calls after me. No problem, I chirp back, unable to keep the smile from my voice as I step outside again. Wood smoke fills the air as workshops begin to open, and I can hear the distant chatter of villagers above the tinkling shells and sea glass that chime in the wind. Wyatt's grandfather is sitting outside of their cottage, his long graying hair stringy and not pulled back as usual. He's already smoking his morning pipe, watching the world wake up. He's never been overtly kind to me, but he dips his chin as I pass, his eyes fixed on mine. I nod at him in return and continue next door to Brahm's house. I walk around his cottage to his apothecary shop in the back and open the door. Daylight filters into the dark space, sending the jars and colored glass bottles into a sparkling frenzy. Since Brahm isn't here, I make quick work of pulling out the bottles Link and I brought back for him, one with a dropper still intact for a tincture, and I head out again. The seamstress is next, and when she answers the door, Lana's hair is in a messy bun, half fallen from rushing around the cottage. Her screaming babe rests on her hip, both mother's and child's cheeks ruddy. Quickly, I hand her the folded materials we found, in case they aren't too molded and moth-eaten to use for something. Then I scurry away. I stop at the alehouse in the center of town and creak the door open. The scent of damp wood and stale beer instantly fills my nose, and as I expect, Reynolds, the tavern keeper, is bustling around and readying for the day. Raph and Hector, however, I hadn't expected to see sitting at a shabby table in the center of the room. Their muttered conversation ceases when Raph notices me. He looks worse for wear, as if he never stopped drinking last night, after I delivered the bad news to him and his mother. Ignoring them, I sidle up to the bar. Rotund and balding, Reynolds blinks from Raph to me. His hair is damp and pulled back in a knot behind his head, and his clothes are fresh, despite the fact his patrons from last night haven't dispersed. I brought you something, I tell him, and his bushy eyebrows lower in confusion. Oh? His gaze shifts quickly over my scars. Yes, I found it in the city the other day, I explain and unwrap a copper valve. I glance at the barrels and jugs stacked and organized behind him. I figured you might be able to use it in one of your casks or something. Reynolds turns the spigot over in his palm, nodding. Yes, this should do nicely. The door creaks open, and we both glance over as Eric's frame darkens the threshold. He doesn't bother scanning the room for his father, but walks right over to the table in the corner, as if he knows exactly where Rory will be. I tell myself to look away and mind my own business, but I can't bring myself to, even if it feels wrong to watch Eric rousing his father from a drunken stupor. Come on, Pop, he murmurs, and as Eric hauls his father up, the older man practically clings to him. Oh, a female voice simpers. Reynolds' daughter, Amelia, comes out from the storeroom. She is all smiles, and her blonde waves fall prettily around her face. She smooths her hands down her apron as she saunters over to Eric. Her skirt is simple, nothing overly feminine or fancy, but next to him, she looks like a doll. I was hoping I'd see you, she says. Eric gives her a smirk, as if he had much of a choice. The instant he spots me, I look away. Right, well, I say to Reynolds, tapping the counter. I'm glad it's useful. I grab my sack to leave. Thank you, Samara. With a nod, I head back toward the door. Most basic, Raph grumbles. I don't know how they can even live like this. He pours himself another glass of ale from the pitcher in front of him until it's empty. Whether it's lack of sleep, anger that he's here at all, or my defenses rising as he belittles our livelihood, I drop my sack on his table, making the freshly poured contents slosh out of his mug and all over his hand. I'm sorry, I missed some of what you said, I say bitterly. Raph huffs, but his grin is far too wide and entertained for my mood this morning, his eyes glittering too brightly. I was just noting how rustic your lives are here. He gestures around the alehouse. Posts and beams, tables and chairs, unadorned, bare wood is all there is. At least there are windows, he slurs. Yes, our village is rustic, I bite out. Because metal attracts lightning, idiot. And if you knew anything about life here, you would thank us for how rustic we are. Because it's what will save your ass while you're in Ebonpeak. I nod in the direction of the ridiculous dragon-shaped ship in the cove. Why don't you test your luck and see if you can earn one of those feathery scars you were so curious about and sail home? Today, if you want to. None of us are stopping you. His brow furrows, and when I look at Hector, he's staring at me with an unreadable expression. I lift my sack again. Enjoy your morning. I deadpan. I shouldn't feel satisfied in being so abrasive, but I do. I can feel Eric's, Rory's, and everyone else's eyes on me as I stride out, and as the door swings shut, I allow myself a real smile. Chapter 15. Just as I worried, the afternoon is ominous and dark. Though I've always appreciated that Gil's cottage sits toward the back of the village, elevated away from prying eyes, only now does it seem ironically fitting as I watch the raider's ship being tossed like a toy out at sea from the doorway. It's anchored far enough from shore they are in no danger of hitting the rocks in the cove, but the wind is fierce, the sky a purple-gray, and it's only a matter of time before the full storm hits and the ship is all but consumed by waves. While most of the villagers are already indoors, tending to household chores saved for days like these, like reading lessons, baking, and mending, a few of the raiders straggle out of the feasting hall in the distance. They teeter as if they've lost their sea legs on land and make their way back to the ship with the others. Behind me, Gil clatters around, soaking our dishes from supper. Our stomachs are barely full, but not for lack of the delicious butter and blackberry preserved toast with prosciutto I'd prepared. Neither of us, it seems, have much of an appetite, not with so much unsettled, now that our visitors know they can't leave until the worst of storm season passes. They'd barely had a handful of hours to sleep off their drunken festivities before the sky opened and the world turned gray. It's almost smile-worthy, their ignorance, but I keep my caustic thoughts and snide remarks to myself. Mostly. There's the queen, I mutter loud enough so Gil can hear. Issa hurries in and out of sight between cottages, clutching my father's arm in the rain as if she might melt. As I realize they're making their way in my direction, I straighten. Wait. I whirl around to look at Gil. They aren't. You didn't. The words die on my lips as he averts his gaze. They are not staying with us. You can't be serious. Your father asked, Gil! I practically shriek. I can't help my sudden rush of dread. It's not enough that he's just shown up with his new family and raider friends, but now they are going to be living with us? Just temporarily, he says, but there's no real conviction in his reply, because Gil knows what an unpleasant situation this is likely to turn into. Issa was feeling ill on the ship. Of course she was, I grumble, and crossing my arms over my chest, I lean against the doorframe, ignoring the rain that's begun to fall sideways, misting against me as it catches in the wind. You won't be put out. I'm giving them my loft. I whirl around again. No, I blurt. Where will you sleep? And what about your arthritis? What about it? He counters, lifting his eyebrow wryly. Do you forget I am a great warrior? I grit my teeth. You're not giving up your loft for them. They can have mine, You'll what? Gil prompts. Go stay with Link and Violet's family? A scowl inches its way over my face. I feel it in the pinch of my lips and the twitch of my eye. I'll sleep with Fergus if I have to. It's safe out there and I'll be warm enough. You will not. Gil's tone is a rare one, reserved for when he feels overtly paternal. Not when I can easily stay with Cynthia. I'm about to argue, despite his fatherly tone, when I realize what this is. How convenient for you, I muse, and the pieces fall together. But why can't I stay with her too, and they can have my loft? Besides, they'll need 2 places to sleep. Raph already said he'd sleep on the floor. You won't be put out. Gil assures me again. Much. His eyes meet mine, and I lean my forehead against the door jamb like a petulant child, because this can't possibly be happening to me?
It will be good for you, Samara, he adds. You need to get to know Abraham again.
I shake my head, watching Issa and my father as they turn down the muddy path. It doesn't escape me that I've always wanted a real family, and suddenly I have one, whether it's the one I wished for or not. And as if the gods are laughing at me, Raph rounds the corner with Andrik and Hector behind him, all of them lugging trunks. Raph's eyes find mine, and he looks about as happy as I am in all of this. Arms crossed over my chest, I step out of the doorway for them to enter, debating if I should bolt to the barn with Fergus before it's too late.
Todo esta lluvia, Issa mutters. So much water.
A chill rakes over my skin as she steps past me, and I'm not sure if it's the way her eyes sharpen on me or if it's simply the wind, but my stomach drops as my new reality sets in again, misery alongside it. Andrik offers me a sympathetic smile as he comes in behind her, and suddenly the cottage isn't a reverie anymore, but a cage, crowded with bodies and movement and noise as the trunks clunk to the ground. My father stomps his boots by the door, and Issa dabs the water from her face, then heaves out a sigh as she wrings the ends of her hair. She peers around our humble cottage, at our narrow, uneven table in the center, our benches alongside it, and 2 cypress rocking chairs situated by the stone hearth. She analyzes our weapons and possessions adorning the walls, taking in her new temporary home, and somehow she looks even less pleased than before.
Welcome,
Gil says, stealing Issa's scrutiny from our laundry hanging on the line, strung between the lofts.
It's not much, but you're welcome here as long as you need.
My eyes narrow of their own accord. You're making this far too easy on my father, they convey, and Gil knows it.
Thank you,
my father says as Issa opens one of the trunks and begins pulling out blankets and furs and God knows what else. I'm not sure where the furs were raided from or if they have white animals in the tropics.
Raph,
Issa says, interrupting his conversation with Hector as she hands a fur to him. He glowers at her, a thwarted expression on his face that entertains me. Or maybe it's the dark circles under his eyes from too much drink and not enough sleep.
Take this and put it...
She studies the small cottage, probably only the size of one of her castle rooms back home.
Up in that loft,
Gil offers.
You and Abraham will be in that one. Pallets will be fine,
my father tells him.
We couldn't put you out more than we already have.
Gil holds up his hand, tapping his bad knee.
I sleep down by the fire most nights anyway. It's better on my joints. Besides, I have someplace else I'll be staying.
My father's eyes find mine briefly, and I can see he's asking me for some sort of permission to stay. At least he seems to care that he's putting us out, even if his companion doesn't. I sigh with a slight nod and lean against the door frame again. The last thing I want to do is get in Issa's way as she bustles around, muttering to herself.
It's far too cold here,
she says, but it's anything but cold. It's almost humid from the summer storms, and even my vest makes me feel claustrophobic. Gil collects a few of his things while Raph and my father utter something about the men and provisions in the longhouse.
Raph,
Issa snips, interrupting their conversation.
Find me some water to wash with, please.
It's not exactly a request, and I don't envy him as she rattles off a dozen other demands so that she can feel comfortable in the squalor she's forced to live in for the foreseeable future. If she cared remotely about anyone other than herself, I might be able to find it in me to feel bad for her. But I can't take it. Instead of listening to her a moment longer, I push off the door, grab my axe from its place on the wall, and head into the rain. The mud squishes beneath my boots as I stalk straight for the barn. There are always chores to be done, and if I get really desperate, I'll visit Link at Violet's. Until the lightning comes, it's just a rainstorm, and unlike Issa, I won't melt. Unlatching the barn door, I close myself inside. Fergus brays at me for disrupting his solitude. Don't start with me, I grumble. You don't know what sort of week I'm having. There's a tinge of manure in the air, but it's also thick with the scent of hay and wood, which is tolerable. And most importantly, it's quiet. Gray morning light filters in through the imperfections in the wood, and I glance around, trying to decide how to pass the day before I can go back inside to sleep. There is wood to split, but I don't want to terrorize Fergus with the constant swing, thud, and crack of my axe so early in our confinement. Deciding I should leave that as a last resort, I snag the basket of leather strips and plop down to make him a new lead rope. Then the barn door swings open. Raph stands in the doorway, the rain pouring around his silhouette, before he seems to gather himself enough to step inside. Running his hand down his face, he heaves a sigh and glances around, oblivious to me in the shadows. My eyes linger on the way the white linen clings to his body, and the tinge of red that soaks through it on his side. His head tilts slightly when he sees me, and he praises me cross-legged on a pile of hay. "You prefer the company of a donkey over ours?" There's a ring of disbelief in his voice. "Better to be around this ass than a different one," I counter. His eyebrow twitches. "Are you looking for something?" I prompt. Raph lifts the bucket in his hand. "Fresh water?" Though I want to tell him to set it outside and let it fill, I assume he would like something more immediate. "There are 2 freshwater barrels around the other side of the barn," I offer. Raph nods, but doesn't turn to leave. I drop the start of my leather braid into my lap and stare at him. "Was there something else?" His expression hardens a bit before he speaks. "Your father sails for weeks to see you, and yet you stay in here." I'm not sure what Raph knows about my father's life before, but I don't bother explaining. "So it would seem." Before he can reply, the sky flashes, followed by a rumble so close and deep the earth moves under us. A ruckus of thunder follows flashes of light, and I walk over to peer out the window at the world around us. "Your men could die in that ship," I tell him, uncertain they realize how dangerous it is to remain in the water. "They are in your feasting hall," Raph says, stepping over to the window beside me. He smells of spices, and the heat of his body shifts the cool air around me. My skin warms and I step away from the window, away from the stranger who represents everything dark and dangerous in my world. More lightning cracks and flashes, and Raph's shoulders inch toward his ears. "Is this?" I straighten, taking in the deep frown that's replaced his smug expression, usually hinged in place. "Have you never been in a thunderstorm?" I ask, intrigued. It's a far more diverting thought than I would have expected. "Of course I have," he says, his eyes skirting back out to the window as another flash lights the sky. The wind howls through the siding and catches some of his curls. "But our storms are not as menacing as this." "Not menacing? And what does your lightning do if not strike and crack and light up the sky? Are there butterflies and rainbows and—"
"We have lightning," he grumbles, "but it's infrequent. It's the endless rains we prepare for, the floods, and the mosquitoes that don't seem to care how wet it is, always thick in the air."
"Mosquitoes?"
"Insects that bite in the constant shroud of heat," he explains, and my obvious ignorance clearly amuses him because his frown lessens a little. I don't have a pithy comeback, though. While I don't mind dirt or blood, imagining biting bugs thick in the air makes my skin crawl, and I shiver. There's another flash and rumble, and as Raph braces his hand on the wall, he winces. I remember the blood and glance at his side. "Have you not dressed your wound?" I ask. While I feel no regret in slicing him with my axe blade, it's foolish not to tend to it. His eyes skirt to mine, his dark lashes catching in a loose curl. "Why, are you worried about me, Samara?"
Amusement creeps its way back into his voice. "No, not in the slightest." I cross my arms over my chest. "But that you haven't taken care of it means your ego is far bigger than I thought. Or you're a fool, though both are probably true," I realize. Once again, he stares at me as if he's trying to figure me out.
"Or,"
he finally says, his gaze resting on my scarred cheek for a heartbeat,
"I've reopened the stitching, moving my mother back and forth from the ship."
I bite the inside of my cheek, uncertain why I feel compelled to help him. "There's thread and needles in the drawers below my loft," I tell him, because he looks capable enough of caring for himself.
"Thanks, but I'm sure my mother has some with all of her things."
He sounds bored of her already, and I shake my head. Why aren't you staying with your men in the longhouse if she's so tiresome? Raph blinks and switches the empty bucket from one hand to the next. Because I will never hear the end of it if I do, he mutters. And from the lift in his brow and the way he watches the sky, I can tell he's questioning going out into the storm again. The metal rods around the village help attract the lightning away from us, I explain, nodding toward the poles spearing from the fortress walls. You should be fine, if you hurry. Should? I lift a shoulder, unable to guarantee him anything. Welcome to Ebonpeak, Raph.
Well, I hope you enjoyed part 1 of Samara's story in Tide and Tempest. This is quite an adventure, and I cannot wait to embark on the rest of it with you. It was my favorite story to write in this series because it was the most fun, and I hope that you will enjoy it as well. Now, be sure to look at the description for links to the other parts of this book because, as I've said in other videos, my audiobooks tend to be on the longer side and they cannot all be uploaded as one full audiobook. So until part 2, be sure you like and subscribe so you will have notifications when they are live, and I will see you on the other side. Happy listening adventures.